Well, today is August 11th, and we're here for part 2 with Mark Leslie. Thank you so much, Mark. I'm Marguerite Hancock. I'm here with David Brock to continue our conversation. Thanks, Mark, for joining us here at the museum. So we last left your story at a cliffhanger. You had finished your work at Rugged, and you were surveying the landscape and thinking about what's next. So let's pick up that story, and can you share with us again, just to set the context for today's conversation, with what you were looking at and what were you looking for in terms of where you're going to put your energy?
Sure. So having my first company blew up, my second company was kind of a turnaround, but not one of these great Silicon Valley successes. I was still quite enthusiastic about creating and building a company, but at that point I come to the conclusion that I can't really predict the outcome. And I spoke last time about how as an entrepreneur you get one opportunity every 4 or 5 years. As a venture capitalist, you get an amazing deal flow. You see everything. You spend all your time in the job of actually thinking about these things. You get to make 30 bets. 1 in 10 of them are quite good, and 1 in 1,000 are amazing, and a lot of them are not. So I concluded that my ability to compete in that arena of trying to pick a winner was really not very advantaged. So I concluded at that point in time that I sat down and I spent some time and said, well, if that's not the criteria, what is important? And I concluded that I wanted to work in software, run a software company. I'd never done that before. I decided that software was an intrinsically better business than a systems business. You do not depend on building hardware, developing and building hardware. So half the development cycle is all the systems companies have to do software and hardware. If you're a software company, you only have to do the software. So you don't have to go, double your pleasure, double your money, double your pleasure over here. Number one. Number two, the software business is an intrinsically more capital efficient business. In running a business, in a hardware business, you have to have inventory. You have wastage as you kind of go through the process. You have customer demonstration equipment. You have product life cycles where you get ready to introduce a new product. The other one stops selling. The new one's late, and so you kind of go through a trough in your business. It's very, very painful. There's all kinds of issues with the hardware business, the systems business, and not the least of which is that when you look at companies that run into accounting problems and things, it's always writing off inventory. Mm-hmm. And if you don't have an inventory account, that's kind of pretty sweet. You don't have to worry about that. So the software business, and I was originally a software engineer, not a hardware engineer, so that's kind of where my heart was as well, and I thought that's what I wanted to do. The second thing I concluded was that I wanted to be in the data path. I think there's 3 kinds of software. Software that does stuff, software that watches the stuff that does stuff, and software you use to create the first 2. And in those 3 categories, the software that does stuff, the data path software, that would be applications, databases, operating systems, networking, infrastructure, et cetera. That's where the largest markets are and the greatest value is built in companies. The stuff that watches the stuff, management systems and reporting systems and display systems and whatever, are really secondary in market size substantially, and more crowded and more difficult to make money in, and development tools is a terrible market, generally speaking. So I wanted to be in the data path. Moreover, I said I really want to be not in applications, but rather to be in infrastructure. just because I wanted to be there. And then lastly, I said I wanted to be actually in the operating systems business. That was as a first choice. That would be most intriguing to me, most enjoyable. So I wanted to do that. I wanted to find a company that was had some developed traction. That the risk of traction, if not fully mitigated, was at least partially mitigated. Risk of traction in small companies is the largest risk. Does anybody actually care when you build a product? Does they actually come to market and buy it? I wanted to work with in a company that I always described it as, I'm a real smart guy, but around here I'm a little below average, and I wouldn't have it any other way. So that's what I looked for in a company, to work with really, really smart people. And so, kind of given that view of the world, I used that as the lens in which I looked at all the different opportunities over that year. As I said, I was consulting in order to be in the market and see what was there. I saw a kaleidoscope of 100 companies, most of which I didn't look at closely. They just passed by. I finally ended up going to a company called Tolerant Software. So a little bit of background on that. I was, am I in the right place here? Yeah.
Before we jump into the Tolerant story, I wonder if we could just, for those who weren't a part of that milieu, could you just mention some of the names of the companies and then what they were doing, so we have a little bit more of the landscape before you jumped in?
Mention the companies
that you were looking at, of these 100 of the kaleidoscope.
I don't remember.
You don't remember any of them? Okay, that's fine. All right, well, let's move forward then. So
it was just, I remember one. I'm not sure I remember the name of it, but it was a real-time operating systems company, and it was really interesting because I really, really, really wanted to do this company, and the guy, the principal venture capitalist director, wanted to take it in the direction of development tools and things of that nature. And I said, no, this can be a great operating systems company. And we kind of had this discussion, and he just wanted to go a different way. And I was really disappointed that deal didn't happen. So the company that emerged was a company called Wind River. I forgot the name of this company, but I was, for the next 5 years, I was convinced that if I had that job, there'd be no Wind River. And it turns out that a couple of 3 years later, this guy came up to me and said, if it was you, there'd be no Wind River. I mean, the same guy. I mean, it was clear in retrospect, but I had the vision, these were operating systems for real-time systems, and I had real-time experience, and I had operating system experience, and I had OEM experience. I was the perfect fit for that job. It was just perfect for me. I was disappointed that I didn't get that. It's the only one I remember, kind of feeling like, oh, that was the right one, and it didn't happen. Go figure, right? I'm sure Veritas is a better outcome.
For sure, but that's very interesting to know, that kind of thought process. So let's continue. So
okay. It was named after some guy, the name of that company, and I looked at that and I said, I know what to do. I just knew what to do. I was totally excited about it. You can see it from how animated I am, right? So I had been recruited to the board of directors of Tolerant Systems probably a year before this. And I had been recruited to the board of directors because they actually tried to hire me to be the CEO of the company. It was one of the companies that passed in the night. Tolerant Systems was somewhat in the same, it was in the same marketplace that my first company, Synapse, was in. So I was kind of a natural candidate, that I had been thinking about this marketplace, and I was, kind of up to speed on the technology, and knew the competitors and knew the space and everything like that. And I looked, as part of my due diligence, I looked at the company, and I came back to the investors and said, so this company is, and the company was doing well at that time. They were probably. There's been $50 million invested in it. This is originally an Adler company. The people who made the investment at Adler were then the founders of Accel. That would be Arthur Patterson and Jim Schwartz. They were at Adler, and then they started Accel. They made the investment at Adler, then they reinvested at Accel. And I made the point that I said, look, this company actually needs to re-implement its idea onto a different architecture. They were on a National Advanced Systems microprocessor chip, and the whole industry was going to 68,000s, and that's where the future was because of the speed in which that was being enhanced. And I said, that's, it's a lot of work. I said, there's a lot of, fix-up work. There's probably $20 million of investment that has to go into this company. And I said, I don't think there's any appetite for the existing investors to actually want to do this. You got to spend $20 million, and you got to go see a trough in revenues and et cetera, and then it's uncertain if they'll ever come out of that, right? So they said, well, look, why don't you come join the board and you help us think about it? And I said, okay, and so I was on the board. The company, this was probably in '88, and the company eventually did fail. They were kind of about a 200-person company at that time. I think they were in a quarter where they were supposed to do, $15 or $20 million in a quarter. And they had been making their prior quarters each time a little more strenuously than the last time, kind of reaching a little harder. And they finally, and when that happens, this always happens, you finally kind of miss the quarter. And when you miss it, you don't miss it by a little bit. It was a catastrophe. They kind of came in at like $3 million on a $20 million quarter. It was awful. And that forced, a decision in the company to say, what do we do? And they decided to shut down the systems business. Now, Tolerant was at that time kind of a clone of the tandem architecture, what they call the loosely coupled technology. And they were implementing this loosely coupled technology on industry standard microprocessors instead of a proprietary instruction set, and an industry standard operating system called UNIX. And so that gave them the opportunity to tandem essentially what Sun was to digital. The newer, younger, lower cost, faster innovation company. That was the kind of the theory of the company. Now, it turns out that Tandem was in the business of competing with IBM in this very enterprise business, and in order to compete in the enterprise business, Unix was missing a lot of pieces because it was essentially it had started out as a laboratory operating system. And one of the things that this company was forced to invest in was to make Unix more commercially robust so that it could compete in the enterprise. So when they shut down this company, they shut down this hardware company, there were about 10 people left. And I should say, they had this people who were doing these critical enhancements to Unix somewhat segregated, and they were actually trying to sell this technology to other competitors in the Unix business as a way of bringing cash into the company so they wouldn't have to go raise more money. So not a great idea, but desperate people do desperate things, right? So the company shut down, and the decision was made that we're going to keep these 10 people working on this critical Unix software and see if there's anything there, turn it into a software company. It's a very complex business. The hardware systems business, we were engaged in in a consortium of all the Korean companies with licensing our technology to them, and so we had a lot of obligations as a company that were kind of we had customer obligations. There's a huge amount of cleanup to do on the system side to not get sued by everybody and their uncle. So they did this. They laid off 190 of the 200 people. There were 10 people left, and this little UNIX group was working on really things that I thought then, and it turned out to be true, that were central to the success of UNIX as a commercial operating system. And one of them was a file system that was and UNIX had a installable file system. You could they had different brands of file systems in there. We built a file system that was in the class of an IBM mainframe. And we built a virtual disk system. Subsequently, it became known as RAID and everything like that, but we were the pioneers. We built a system that said, if you have a file that's bigger than a physical disk, you can make believe you can create a virtual disk that's any size you want, and we'll do all the housekeeping with the little disks to make sure that you don't see that. If you want mirroring, you don't have to figure out how to do that. You just say, I want mirroring, and we'll figure out how to do that. So we create these virtual disks. Mirroring, striping, spanning was creating larger disks. And we said, we kind of opened the door to say, you don't ever have to worry about, disk construction, disk geometry. Just worry about your application. So it was very mainframe oriented. That's the two things that the company were doing.
And how long did it take to develop from this total repivot and restructuring to be able to have those new two things in place?
It was a big project. When I got there, they were midstream in this. The key architects actually came out of Amdahl, which was an enterprise business, competitive with IBM. So they had that culture and that ethic of how to build really mainframe class stuff. So prior to the company going through this cataclysmic event, they had entered into a conversation with UNIX Systems Laboratories. UNIX Systems Laboratories at that time was part of AT&T. And the conversation was that AT&T needed to enhance UNIX. We had leading technology, although incomplete. Clearly where we were going was the place that people needed to get to. UNIX Systems Laboratories at that time was in a war with it was called the Hamilton Group. There was this other UNIX, I forgot the name of it. But DEC, HP, and IBM had said, we're going to have our own version of Unix and not depend on USL. So there kind of was a split, a chasm in the industry over what's the standard of Unix, right? Even though AT&T actually owned the underlying IP. But because of this pressure, it made AT&T amenable to doing whatever it took to be more competitive. And so what was in play at the time that this was all going on was that they were saying, look, why don't we work with tolerant systems? We will forego our opportunity to create our own file system and volume manager in favor of yours, and then we'll go to market together. That was the kind of the plan. And I looked at that. Although this software company had no traction, if you remember, that was one of my requirements. Although it had no traction, I looked at that and I said, well, if that happens, we will be in a position in the marketplace that will allow us to get traction and to essentially reduce, competitive opportunities from other companies. So I kind of looked at that and said that is sufficient on the traction side to attract me. And at that point in time, I went to a couple of directors and said, you had asked me to come and join this company as the CEO, and I didn't do it because I saw these issues. I'm actually would be interested in running this tiny little software company of 10 people if that's of interest to you. And they said, well, let us think about that. Because they had already hired someone and he was now running the company, right? Now the person who was running the hardware company who ended up running the software company, because, you know, he was there, was unhappy. It was reported to me that he was sitting in his office writing his own programs to do stock trading rather than paying attention to the company. People were unhappy. So they went and did a little survey of what's going on in the company, and they walked away saying, you know, this person who's running the company has no interest in it, and they asked him to leave. So anyway, before they asked him to leave, they said, okay, so we're ready to talk. So I said, okay. So we said, one of the guys said, look, why don't we just meet up on our office on Friday afternoon at 3 o'clock and we'll sit down and talk about things. I said, great. So go up there on Friday afternoon and we sit down and talk, and they said, well, what would it take? And, you know, we talked about salary, and we talked about stock, and we talked about the board composition, and we talked about a whole bunch of different things, you know. And, around 5 o'clock, the conversation was over, and one of the directors says to me, look, well, I've written all this stuff down on this, you know, yellow pad. Why don't we just all sign this thing and we have a deal? And I said, okay.
What a great afternoon.
I remember the plan of execution was they're going to go in on Monday at 4:30 and fire the old CEO. I'm going to show up at 5 o'clock, and they're going to introduce me, and at 5:30 they're going to leave, and I'm there alone. That was the plan. So I signed this thing on Friday afternoon, and like on, you know, I have until, you know, Monday morning to say, wait a second, right? So there's not a lot of time to think it over or anything like that. Anyway, it'll work out okay. So this software company had been, you know, in play about 5-6 months at that point in time. I was now on the board of this software company, and they had changed their name, you know, because it was a new business and everything like that. And they told the board, we want to change our name, and your board of directors say whatever, you know. And they came in one day and they had a flip chart with a curtain in front of it, right? You know, because they're going to do the unveiling, you know, and. Name of the company is Tolerant Systems, and, you know, they go through all this thing about how they kind of came up with this new name and everything like that, and they put their hand on the curtain, ta-da, and they open it up, and it's called Tolerant Software. I mean, so I'm sitting there as a director saying, like, well, you can't say anything. I mean, it's their company, and they're the guys that are doing it, and you don't want to go rain on their parade or anything like that. So it's like, whatever. So anyway, you know, when I finally got there, I met this team, and I said, look, I'm a very, very participative, you know, manager. I believe everybody should work together, but before we do any of that stuff, we're changing the name of the company. And they all looked at me, and they said, to what? And I said, I don't care, as long as it doesn't have the name Tolerant in it. So we decided to have a little naming contest. We encouraged everybody in the company and everybody's, you know, family to, you know, submit opportunities, you know, naming opportunities. I submitted a name that a friend of mine, I was on the board of another company, and a friend of mine who was the CEO of that company had a naming consulting firm generate 3 pages of names. So they picked one, and I said, so are you using that paper anymore? So I picked up the name Veritas from that paper, actually, which was, you know, pretty cool. So we ended up with 3 names, Veritas, Aegis, and some third name. I forgot what that one was. And we gave it to the attorneys and said which one would be the least expensive to change our name to and to own. You know, they do a search about who's going to sue you for these things. So we ended up with Veritas. And I had said to the management team, I said, look, you know, it's important you change the name of the company, it's important to send a message to your customers, and equally important to your employees, that it's new, it's different, and it's changed. And tolerant, the word tolerant doesn't do that. It was just too subtle a change. So we changed the name of the company, and we announced this to the troops, and not a lot of troops. We had a few troops, and we had a new logo and everything like that. And the next day, one of the more cynical engineers comes in wearing a T-shirt that says, "Veritas, we're not tolerant anymore."
That's fantastic.
So that was pretty good. There was a lot of heavy lifting to do early on in the company. We did a 50-to-1 reverse stock split.
Reverse. In reverse.
Yeah, 50-to-1 reverse stock split. We had to go around, and I asked the board to do most of this. We had to go around to some of the other directors and many of the board observers, because there were a board meeting was 20 people in a room before management got there. So I said, look, we just can't do this. It's just we can't do this. I said we had to do capital recapitalization, otherwise we can't raise money. You're certainly not going to raise money on top of the $50 million invested in tolerant systems. We had to extricate ourselves from this contract in Korea. I have a little story on that. Do you want a little story on that?
We do.
Yeah.
That was
So we have this contract that goes on for years. We license technology. Initially, we sell systems. Then they eventually come and build their own, and they send us royalties. And it's fenced off to either Korea and a few places in Asia or something. I don't remember exactly what the details were. But there were 5 companies involved, and it was government sponsored, and it was Samsung, Daewoo, Lucky Gold Star, and one more. It was the big, not Karetsu. They call them something else in Korea. But it was.
Mm-hmm.
There was 4. There were 5 of them, and
Maybe
all
LG.
5 of them were in this deal with us, right? Or there were 4 plus a government agency. All 5 of them. So it was a very, very complicated business, right? To discuss things with them. So me and the CFO, my sidekick, we get on an airplane. We go to Korea, and we get in this room, and there's 2 of us and like 50 of them. Each one of them has 10 people in their group. And we get up in front of them and we say, "So we're getting out of the hardware business, and we want to go, make a deal with you guys and cut you loose and do what we can to help you out, and et cetera, et cetera." So we had this. It was this marathon session all day long. We don't speak Korean. We don't have our own interpreter. They're talking to each other. The only word we hear is counter proposal. Counter proposal is the only word we can recognize in the whole discussion. It's a Korean word for counter proposal. So finally, at the end of the day, we make an agreement that we're going to have this structured separation. We're going to give them all of the IP to keep. They can do whatever they want with it. We're going to do some additional engineering that was required in order to get it up to a level that was workable for them. They were going to pay us money, so that was kind of a partial financing for the company. I think it was worth about $3 million to us. It's a lot of money. And so we went home. One of the things I was doing at the time was, as a brand new CEO, I was interviewing each and every employee in the company to find out, what they like and what they don't like and what makes them happy. And one of the most prominent message that came from that was, we're really excited about what we're doing over here, but we're software guys, and the guy running engineering is a hardware guy left over from the old company, and we don't want to work for him. Because software guys are better than hardware guys. They didn't say that. I had never met a software guy that didn't believe that. So I called him into my office and I said, "Look, you're a wonderful guy. They just don't want to work for a hardware guy, so we're going to have to make a change. But we got this big project, for Korea that, we're going to put you on a consulting contract for, 3 to 6 months and give you a nice runway to make a change, and, no hard feelings, and it worked out great. And we ended up recruiting a new VP of engineering.
So Mark, you've described, you called it heavy lifting, this incredible amount of, on the capital side, your partners and all these, very difficult. People considered it risky. You could have started in a sense, maybe started a company on your own, and yet you chose to take one that existed and shifted. Tell us a little bit about kind of what was in your mind as you were thinking about building Veritas as a new CEO, and that decision to remake and reshape and then build. Going forward.
It's interesting. It's a very interesting question, and I think a lot of my commitment at that time with all this heavy lifting was really more intuitive than it was intellectual at that time. I really believed so one of the things you had to believe in order for this to be an attractive opportunity is that UNIX was going to be ascendant relative to IBM in the mainframe business. This is 1989. Now, that was not an easy thing to believe in 1989. IBM enjoyed complete hegemony in the industry certainly at the enterprise mainframe level. Microsoft was emergent, but they were a desktop system at that point in time. They were not yet an enterprise system. You could not read any article about the industry in the trade press or in the financial press, in the business press, that didn't have a quote from Microsoft in it. That's how pervasive they were. Their influence was so pervasive in the industry. They had taken out all the other mainframe companies at that point in time, CDC and Honeywell, and what they call the Seven Dwarfs, if you remember.
Yes.
I'm sure in your work you've seen that. And I believe that. I believe that UNIX was going to be ascendant. I didn't actually realize how complete the ascendancy was going to be, because 10 years later, it was essentially over. UNIX had won. Today it's called Linux, and had essentially replaced the mainframe as the operating system of the future. There's a long legacy of it, right? But in those 10 years, the world changed. And but I believed in 1989 that UNIX was going to be ascendant. So that's one of the reasons I was involved. I mean, one of the primary motivations for me was vision of the future, which I think, I believe that disruption is the mother's milk of opportunity, right? And I could see this disruption, and I thought this was the right company. I mean, not the right company, but a company that could play in this thing. Now, it turns out there's a little bit more information here, and then I can answer the question a little bit better. I went and renegotiated the AT&T agreement. So just as I got there, this agreement got signed, which is what I had believed when I went there, that it would get signed. A few months later, I went into AT&T and said, this agreement we've signed, I mean, always you find yourself doing things you never believed you would do when you're a CEO of a company in a startup. It's just like, really? So I call up the president of UNIX Systems Laboratories, said, I need to come to see you. We make an appointment. I go in to see him, and I said, that agreement we have, it doesn't work for us. We need to renegotiate it. And he turns around and looks at me and says, we just signed it 6 months ago. And I said, I know, but it doesn't work, and if we go out of business, it's not good for you. It's not good for you. It's worse for us, but it's terrible for you. So we got to fix this thing. We had an agreement where both parties were going to go share. Both parties were going to market, sell, and then share revenues 50-50. I concluded after a couple of months that they weren't going to sell anything because it wasn't their life and death. We were going to do all the work, and we were going to give them 50%, and it didn't work for us. So I came in and proposed that we change it to 85-15, and we give them 10% of the company, and they agreed to that. Now, you have to. So here's the really interesting thing. Veritas could never have been a startup. It had to be a restart. So it was a restart. We had the benefit of the technology was already under development. The AT&T agreement was crafted and signed at that point in time. We became an OEM supplier to the systems companies. The idea of Veritas was we were building this operating system components and we were going to sell them in the form of a source to Sun, HP, IBM, and the other 97 UNIX systems companies. Dansk Data, ICL, Siemens. I mean, they were just every place. Honeywell, Bull, Prime, Sequent, DEC, Data General. Everybody had a UNIX offering. So, and there were about 100 companies. I lost my train of thought there. So.
Why it had to be.
So we had this business model where, if we had tried to start this company and raise money and said, look, we're going to develop this software, we're going to go craft a deal with AT&T after we develop it, and because of that, we're going to have a proprietary position in the marketplace and we're going to close all these OEM deals, we would have been laughed out of town. There's no way you could convince anybody that that was a viable plan. But because we were already in the business, and because we were already in mid-stroke in our journey over here, we were actually able to accomplish something that we could never have accomplished as a startup. We never could have. It was just ridiculous to think of this as a startup. We're going to go build up something, and we're going to go get a contract with AT&T. That's a unitary risk, right? If that doesn't happen, you have no company. And if that didn't happen, I'm not sure how you'd actually be able to do this. And we were able to go into all these other companies, say, we're AT&T's partner, they're not developing this stuff, we're going to OEM it to you the same way they OEM UNIX to you, and we're going to make you successful. And we became an arms dealer. We sell it to one, and then we say, you compete with the other guy, and then we go to the other guy and say, you compete with the guy we just sold it to, and you're in trouble. You don't have the weapons, right? And we thought of ourselves as an arms dealer. We didn't tell that to our customers, but we thought of ourselves that way. So Veritas could have been a startup. It's one of the fascinating things about the story is that if it didn't have this horrible past that kind of created these assets, we never could have done it.
Thank you so much for explaining that. Really crystallizes an important understanding. I'd like to pursue that by getting a little bit more into the mind of you as a CEO. Did you see this strategy like a chess player, pieces in advance, or were you discovering it as the weeks and months went on in those early
Well,
years?
the strategy of the deal with AT&T and becoming an OEM supplier to the industry was pretty clear. I mean, that's who we were. I mean, that was who the software business was when I was on the board, right? I mean, and I understood the OEM business, and I understood the software business. I understood operating systems. This was a perfect fit for me, right? So that wasn't, there wasn't really much at that moment in time. There wasn't a lot of strategy. It was about, going out and making this thing happen, right? So then we had to go out and raise money. And we got a little bridge loan from our investors, and I went out to talk to the world of venture capital, which I knew a lot of people in that world, and we got turned down 50 times in a row. And always my students ask me, how could you keep going? And I don't even know the answer to that. It's just like, who cares when you get turned down? You just go knock on the next door. I mean, to me, it was like, I'm sorry. to me, it was like, duh. You just go on the knock on the next door. You just keep going until you finally get someone to do it. So we finally found an investor who had a senior investor who had a brand new associate, and he said, you do the analysis and make a decision. This person was was shaking. He was so nervous about the whole thing. We brought him across the line, unfairly. I mean, we just kind of bludgeoned him into this deal, and we finally got an investment into the company. With the bridge loan and the new investment, Veritas raised a total of $4 million to build this company. We never raised any more money after that.
Wow.
Who were those early investors, so we can get their names on the record?
The early investors.
At
At that time.
At that time, the 4
The
million.
new investor was Bessemer Ventures.
Okay.
Neil Brownstein was the partner who made. He actually let this guy make the decision. I'm not sure whether he approved of it or not, but it was part of the development of a new person in the firm. Right? Is to sometimes you let them make a mistake. It wasn't an expensive mistake. It was $1.5 million they were doing. And the Axel Partners and Axel Ventures and Matrix Partners were the other two principal investors, and then there was one smaller investor out of Toronto. I forgot the name. Ben Webster was the investor. He's a great guy, and that was it. That was the investment group at that point in time. And we had, as I said, 20, 30 firms had prior invested, and nobody invested in this. This was, kind of, they all moved on. So now we've got the AT&T project cleaned up. We're finishing up our software. We're out selling our software. In the first year, we actually didn't have any actual software to sell. So we sold them agreements to be friends with them. We made them into strategic partners, and we gave them, early look at things, and we visited with them, and we charged them $25,000 for that, and we sold a bunch of those, So that was because you don't need to sell; you sell what you got, right? So we did that. And then, we really built great products, truly great products. We had a great development staff. They built enterprise-class products that had that were of extraordinarily high quality. It was quite remarkable. And we went out and we delivered this to these, various, OEMs. Now, the problem with our business is that when you deliver it to the OEM, they don't ship anything. They have to integrate it into their version of UNIX, which goes out on their next release. So every place we went where we were successful, there was a delay between the time we sold it until the time a revenue stream opened up. The revenue stream was royalties. When they ship our product with their product, we get a check.
Got it.
We eventually, over the next couple of 3 years, closed deals with about 60 companies. And we became the unequivocal standard in the industry. Some people went their own way, but for the most part, we were the technology of choice. And the more pervasive we got, the more of choice we got. We were the Rambus of our day in that little segment of the marketplace. We by the time we were by the end of so I joined the company in '89. By 1993. People had actually started shipping some of our product. It was an amazingly great business, this royalty business, because we had a tiny little sales staff. Once you get a royalty stream started, you're just clipping coupons. Every quarter, they just send you money, right? They send you a report. We have a right to audit the report. They send you a report, and they send you money. So we always recognize the revenue in arrears. So the revenue for the quarter one would actually show up in quarter two, and we would recognize the revenue in quarter two. That's when we'd actually get the report. But at the beginning of quarter two, we would call them up and say, "How's it going? What are you going to send us?" Right? So there was never any suspense in the business. It was unbelievably, easy, quiet. They just, we just knew every quarter what the numbers were going to be. By 1993, we had at that point in time 4 quarters of profitability with $10 million in revenue, which was amazing, right? I mean, And at that time, if you wanted to go public, you needed 4 quarters of profitability in arrears. That was the standard at the time. So in December of 1993, we took the company public. And
Tell us a little bit more about the road to that, getting it ready, and the sort of momentous event of taking it public.
So I went around to the investment banks and all the, at that time that wasn't Goldman and Morgan, at that time was Hambrecht and Quist and Robbie Stevens and whatever. Those were the principal guys in the industry. And they all told me to come back in a couple of years when we were, 30, 40 million in revenue, that we were just too small. I believed that, we had raised $4 million total. We never had any money. Along the way, we did 2 capital infusions from our customers. I mean, there was we did a deal with Siemens at one time. They wanted to do a buyout. Everybody wanted to do a buyout of our product, and everybody wanted to have a commoditization clause. Everybody said, "Look, it's great technology, but we don't want you to own us in the future. Let us just buy the technology out, and we'll see you. Go your own way." So we never did that. I was adamant about it, and I think I had the insight to say that if you want to build a real company, you can't do this. You can't give away your IP, and you can't sign a commoditization agreement, which gives them control on your pricing. We were deemed, quote, hard to do business with because we were intransigent about those 2 things. But I believe, and I was, you're in a company and they got the sales guy in there and everybody wants to close a deal, and I said no, And we ended up closing the deals anyway, and it was pretty good. We did 2 deals along the way that we did, quote, buyouts on. One was with Siemens Nixdorf. They were adamant. We ended up kind of walking through the thinking on the thing, and we gave them $1 million. For $1 million, we gave them a buyout of the license that was rev locked, meaning they don't get any futures, and it was fenced to Germany. And we looked at the $1 million, and we looked at the present value of it, and how long it would take them to get to the market, and then how are they going to sell it, and what I wrote. We said, we're going to make out like a bandit on this deal, and they'll be back for more. So we did that deal, and that was essentially in lieu of doing a fundraising for us. And then we did another deal, probably a year later. UNIX Systems Laboratories came to us. That was our partner. We're going to compete on the desktop, and we want to put your file system into the desktop version to compete with Microsoft. And we're willing to pay you $1.2 million for a buyout, and the desktop price was like in pennies, right? It was like a nickel or a dime or something like that. And we did the math, and we looked at each other and we said, they're never going to do this. This is never going to happen. We'd rather have a buyout than a royalty stream, because they're never going to displace Microsoft. They're never going to get to the volumes they need to get to this thing, to be economic for them. So we did that deal. And these things were not easy decisions for us. We would sit and fret over these things and do all the math and talk to each other, and we worked very hard on making the right decisions and everything like that. So we finally said we'll go do the deal, and we were just right then, kind of running out of money, and we were, I remember vividly. I went to my investors and I said, I don't know what's going to happen over here. We might have to, do something. And the investors came back. And came back with a very oppressive down round in order to. They said, we'll do a deal, but this is what it's going to look like. And it really was ugly. And the first round of when I joined the company, on the first round that we ever did, I had negotiated a 50% anti-dilution clause, which is pretty good. But now I don't have any anti-dilution, right? So it was going to be pretty oppressive. So I remember calling up the president of UNIX Systems Laboratories on a Tuesday, and because we were worried about payroll on Friday, and we could pull the trigger with the investors, but it was horrible. And I said, so look, we've all agreed to this thing. We've already signed the papers. We'd like you to wire us the $1.2 million today. And he said, oh? I said, yes, it's very important to us. He said, well, I'll take care of it tomorrow. I said, no, you don't understand me. I said, we need you to take care of it today. I mean, that's how desperate you are, right?
Yeah.
This is a different president of USL. This is, time has moved on. It's a different guy. And he said, okay. And he wired us the money. So that was, so we dodged a bullet. We got that money into the company. Exactly, we lived to fight another day, and then we eventually went for I have another little, you want these little anecdotes? You like these things?
I do.
Okay.
David?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I remember when we had to deliver our first so we had this sharing agreement with, revenue sharing agreement with AT&T. And I remember we had the very first time we had to deliver a check to them. We had it was a $25,000 check. And if you're AT&T and a $25,000 check comes in, right, exactly.
Shrug.
Exactly, whatever, it's irrelevant. Doesn't pay for pencils. So I said to, we were headed back there. I said to the CFO, I said, let's not send them a check. Actually, you don't even send a check. You do wire transfer typically. I said, let's bring cash.
What?
He said, no, you can't do that. I said, yes, you can. Go figure it out. So he goes, and we get a bank here to work with a bank there. And we go to New Jersey. We alert their PR department. We have this secret going on. We need a photographer, and we get met by an armored car with a guy with a shotgun. Right? He hands us a bag of money. This is like in the movies, right? And one of our guys dumps out everything in his briefcase, and we had figured out how many fives, how to fill up the briefcase. $25,000 is not a lot of money, right, in the briefcase. So we said we'll take it in fives and tens, so we can fill up the briefcase, right? So we fill up the briefcase, and we go up to visit with the CEO, the president of the division, not CEO of the company, but the president of the division, a guy named Larry Dooling. And I said, Larry, so this is our very first payment. We've got $25,000 that was part of our agreement. We want to share with you, and we actually have it with us today. And he thought I was going to take a check out of my pocket, And I said, and here it is. And I opened up this briefcase, right? And he's just looking at this thing in disbelief, And then we had the pictures and everything like that. And and I said to him, I said, now we're going to take this back and just send you a wire transfer, so you don't have to worry about what to do with $25,000 in cash. But it was really cool because I said before we left that building, every single person in the building knew that Veritas was there with a bag of cash, and that was, it was a tiny little stunt, but our profile in AT&T went from 0 to. That was a really cool thing to do. These guys put in $25,000 in cash, in a briefcase. So that was a great little anecdote, a little shared memory that we have from the company. Okay, so
did you have the sense that the person you were going to meet with had a good sense of humor, or because
he was an okay guy. He was a guy I did the renegotiation with. He was an okay guy. He was an AT&T lifer.
Right.
What it's like. We owned the stage, not him.
Okay.
So I was not worried about it. Okay, so
we're talking about you building this company rapidly from small to bigger, doing things like this that raise the visibility and going public. Now take us on the trajectory. In the 90s, you just had this sort of rocket ship of growth. Tell us what was behind that.
This is a really it's a really interesting story. And it's become really central in my thinking about what makes a difference in a company, and that goes to the idea of strategic transformation. So here's what happened. We went public in 1993. We raised $16 million. and we were like richer than Croesus. I mean, we were like, oh my God, $16 million. If everything goes bad, we can reconstruct a new company with this. I mean, that's how we felt about it. It was so much money.
Absolutely.
And our market cap after we concluded the deal was $64 million. I mean, it's like today companies raise $300 million and equal to our 16 million, and they do it at market capitalizations in the hundreds of millions and the billions of dollars. So this is a micro or a nano IPO. It was tiny, right? But for us, it was huge. So we've got this business. We go into 1994. Before I do this, I should tell you another story. I should tell you this. There's another.
Please do.
Excuse me?
Please do.
Yeah, there's another story. It's our first quarter as a public company. This is the March quarter of 1994. And my aunt and uncle from the East Coast are visiting, and we all go up to Point Reyes, my wife and myself and my aunt and uncle, on a Friday. So I take a day off from work. I'm up at Point Reyes, and I'm dialing in every half hour or so to pick up my voicemail. There's no text, there's no email at that time. And at around 11 o'clock, I get a message that Sequent, our customer with whom we had a development contract that we were going to take to revenue in the current quarter, called up and said they're canceling our contract. We'd done all the work. We've been working on this thing for a year. It was a troubled project. It was $350,000 in a quarter that was about a $2.5 million quarter. It was a disaster. It was. I mean, our first quarter as a public company, one of the rock solid things we had in the quarter was we're taking this deal to revenue, and all of a sudden the rug gets pulled out from underneath us. And I describe this, when I teach, I tell this story. So I'm there with my wife and my aunt and my uncle, and I've got this rock in my stomach. I keep calling in for more, see if anything good can happen. Nothing good happens. And I'm living the rest of the day in a silent movie. That is, my wife and my aunt and uncle, they're all talking, and I have no idea what's going on because I'm just spinning on this whole thing. This is the life of a CEO, by the way. This is how, this is a story that everybody I know as a CEO would relate to. And it's a catastrophe. I mean, it's just, we're going to miss our quarter. We're going to disappear as a public company. We're going to be hated by, all our investors. Everybody's going to sell. Our stock's going to get cut by 80%. It's going to be a terrible thing, right? And then, of course, you have all the employees that are going to be unhappy with the stock price. And how do you dig yourself out of that hole? So it was a moment for me. I was not in the office, and it turned out that for me was gave me opportunity to think about it in a way that without reacting to it, to be able to think about it over the weekend. And I went into the office on Monday. I don't know, we're probably 40 people in the company. Everybody knows. You walk in the office, it's like a funeral parlor. Everybody got their head down and everything. And we convene our staff meeting every Monday morning. We had a staff meeting, and I sit down, and nobody's saying anything. And I said, so first, I have to say that we deserve to get this thing canceled. We deserved it. We did not do a good job. We didn't think it would get canceled, but we actually deserved it. And we ought to go figure out what we did wrong. And I don't want to do that right now because I don't want to start fixing the blame. I want to fix the problem. So I want to put a moratorium on that for a month. And in a month, I want to do a post-mortem and figure out how we can be better. And I said, okay, so now we have this terrible problem in front of us. We're $350,000 short of our goal for the quarter. Does anybody have any ideas? And I looked around the room, and everybody's looking at me, and nobody has any ideas. And I said, I have an idea. And I said, and they all like got interested, you know, because somebody's got an idea. And I said, my idea is that we go to Sequin and we ask them for $100,000. And then they're looking at me like, what are you talking about? I said, no. So I said, look, I said, there's 3 reasons why I think we can do this. I said, first, no project that fails is a single parent project. There has to be guilt on the other side. So they have to feel something about their own obligation to the failure. This. I said, second, okay?
Great.
Yeah. I said, second, we offer them a clean release. We sign a piece of paper, no liability, we go our own way. And I said, third, we beg for mercy. They're a public company, they know what it's like, we're just recently public, we tell them, you know, this is a disaster, and we beg for mercy, basically. Nothing wrong with that. So one of the guys in the room, he owned the account. I said, Rich, do you think you can go talk to them about that? He said, yeah. I said, why don't you leave the meeting, get on an airplane, go up to Oregon, call us when you know something. And he left the meeting. And then I said anybody else have any ideas? So the sales guy says, well, we got this deal over in London. It's a $250,000 deal. It's teed up for next quarter. We, you know, if we discounted it, we probably could bring it in. I said, well, who's the sales rep? Well, Peter's the sales rep. Peter is now a famous guy. It's Peter Levine from Andreessen Horowitz. But that day, Peter was a very young OEM salesman. This was his day in the office when he wasn't planning to see anybody. So he was wearing a T-shirt, shorts, and flip-flops with no socks. And I said, well, why don't you see if call Peter, see if he can come. And so Peter comes in, and we say, you know what's going on? And he said, yeah, we want to go visit, we want to go talk to ICL. I said, you know what's going on? He said, yeah. I said, we want to go talk to ICL. We want to see if we can craft a deal with them. It's an emergency. Do you have your passport with you? He said he did. I said, why don't you go to London and see if you can make a deal happen? I said, get in your car, drive to the airport. We'll have a ticket waiting for you. And he said, okay. Peter, I love Peter. He is fearless. He's a fearless warrior. He will do anything. So he gets in his car, and he has his cell phone, and he calls this guy in London, and he said, I'm coming to do a deal. I have no place to sleep. I have no clothes, and I have no toiletries. Can you help me out? This is Peter, right? To him, it was like a totally normal thing. The guy said, sure, come on down, you know. So we said we're going to do 175. So we got 100 in play. We now got 175 in play. That's 275. And then we kind of identified a bunch of other, pots and pans, right? So little things that we could do. So I tell this story because this is what I call, this event is a black day in a company. This is a day when the company's future is at stake. And, I believe that part of leadership is being able to take the team through these black days, to face adversity together, to get people focused on doing something that can save the day. And I believe that after you do it, you have built a sense of camaraderie and teamwork and commitment in the company that is enduring. And I didn't know all that before this event. This was a learning experience for me that we could do this. So that was a very, right after we went public, that was a really big event in the life. It's invisible from the outside, but in the inside, it was a big event in the company that we did this. And we made every quarter. I mean, we made that quarter, and Sequin agreed to the $100,000. I mean,
Did they? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it was, I believed when I said that was going to happen. I had thought about it, and I said, we can talk them into $100,000, The release is worth $100,000 to them, and the mercy, if you're humble enough, works, right? So right after that event, right after the first quarter, we sat down in the company, and I think this is probably the most pivotal event in the life of the company. We sat down in the company, And we said, so how big can this company become? And then what else are we going to do? So we kind of had this, we've achieved, we've got an IPO, we got 10 million in revenue in arrears. We had, when we went public, what we called a train schedule. We said, well, we've done a deal with this company. They're scheduled to ship their operating system in October, and our revenues start the quarter after. And we laid out all these different companies, and it was like a train schedule. You could just see when everybody starts. I said some guys will be late, but you can just see this revenue stream grow over time. And it's all on automatic pilot at this point in time. It was a great story. So so then we sat down and we said, we kind of asked this question, and here's the conclusion we came to. We said that that a customer will pay you $1 million and feel really good about it, $1 million a year. They'll pay you $3 million a year. If they're not paying attention, they'll pay you $5 million a year. They'll never pay you $25 million a year because they can always design you out. So when the number gets too big, they're going to come to you and say, we're going to design you out. And you're going to say, well, maybe we can work something out. And they're going to essentially make you drive your price down in order to keep the account. Because there's a limit to how much is worth to them not to have to design you out. So we said, if we've got all these companies and the maximum you can get from any company is $5 million, that kind of puts a ceiling. And then we said, well, there's 100 companies. Do we think there's going to be 200 companies or 10 companies in the future? What do we think is going to happen in the industry? And we concluded there are going to be 10 companies, not 200. There weren't going to be more companies, there are going to be less companies. There's going to be consolidation in the industry. So that was a problem. Now here we are, we're 10 going on, 15, 18, whatever it was that following year. Actually I have the records at home, but we looked at that and we said, we can see ourselves being a $50 million company, $60 million. Maybe we can stretch it out, maybe things will happen, consolidation will happen. I don't think we'll ever get to 100 million. That's what we believed in 1994. And so we said, well, what are we going to do about that? And we sat down and we spent about a year to develop a strategy for the company that was transformational. The first thing, the first point of the strategy was to say, look, we've got this huge installed base that's being put out by our customers. Why don't we figure out what we can sell to that installed base that makes us special, gives us a special thing to do. The problem we had was that when we sell our software to HP and HP incorporates it into their operating system, the IP that makes it work in their operating system belongs to them, not to us. So we can't use that. So we looked at the market and we said, we'll do it in the Sun marketplace, and we'll go out and we'll redo everything to build our own versions of this stuff. And they'll have the Sun version, and then we can go in and say, do you want the Gold version? So we decided to do that, to do a file system and volume manager for the Sun market. We then decided that we needed to be able to sell that, so we had to go out and actually start building at the same time we were developing, we had to go build a sales force that could do that. So that was point number one, is to go out and kind of try to monetize the value of our installed base. The second thing we said we wanted to do was is there anything else we can sell to the same guys? We've got a file system and volume manager. Is there anything else? So we acquired a company that was doing a high availability failover product, which is a perfect thing for us to have. And we bought them for $5 million, and we then kind of added something into our inventory that we could go and monetize with our OEM installed base rather than our end user installed base. The next thing we said in our strategy, and this took us a year to put together, by the way. I mean, we sat down and said, we went through every possible, opportunity we can think of and trying to did a SWOT analysis and kind of, drove them all to ground, and we did, make-believe financials on them, and we ended up with these 4 things. So the third thing was, we're in the UNIX market. We think there's going to be another prominent operating system in the market. We don't know whether it's going to be NT, OS2, or NetWare at this point in time, because they're all competing out there, and it's just too early to tell who's going to win. But one of them will emerge, and it'll be UNIX and this other thing. So we got to figure out how to be on the other thing, whatever it turns out to be. And so we started working on that problem, and we're trying to work on all of them, but we don't know who's going to win. So of course that's problematic. And the last piece of the pie was, and of course it turned out to be NT being the winner. The last piece of the puzzle was we wanted to get into the backup business. And the reason we wanted to get into the backup business is for the same reason that Microsoft got into the browser business, because we own the file and disk management in everybody's Unix operating system. If we could be in the backup business, we would have an enduring competitive advantage relative to anybody else, because we knew we could put secret sauce in there that no one would know about, and we could make it available in our backup. So that was our plan of record. That was our strategy, our stated strategy. We executed, on the high availability failover and going to market. We actually, in terms of going to market with a follow-on product for monetizing our end user base, we actually created a project in India to develop those projects. That was our first time in India. We were very early in India in 1994 or something like that. And the backup was we knew that was the right thing to do, but we couldn't do it. We were a public company. We were small. We were 10, 15 million, $20 million business. And we had to go develop an enterprise class product that worked on every single platform that was out there, which is a 3-year development to build an enterprise class product. And we had to build a sales force that could go sell it, an end user sales force, high-end enterprise sales force. And we looked at it and we just simply didn't have the money, and even if we had the money, we couldn't take the risk of waiting 3 years to figure out if it was going to work. So we decided to acquire it. We said we need to go find a backup company. We need to go put these 2 companies together, and we need to then use this platform to make that backup the most competitive in the world. So my job, we didn't have any BD guys. I was the BD guy as the CEO. It's not unusual in a company that size. So we went and visited with every backup. There were probably, 15, 20 backup companies in the market at that time. In 1995, we started talking to Legato. Legato was the leading backup company in the Unix space. And we laid out this plan. We're going to do a 50-50 deal. We're going to combine the 2 companies. We spent 6 months romancing them. That is, our engineer worked with their engineering manager, our sales guy worked with their sales guy, our support guy worked with their support guy, our HR person worked with their HR. Everybody was, dating. It was all looking great. We ended up with presentations that we made to the boards of directors of both companies. And we all went home on a Thursday night, and Friday we were going to do the deal, and they called us up the following day and said, we're not doing a deal. And we were like stunned. And I said to my guys who were working with their guys, I said, call those guys up and find out what's going on. So our guys called their guys, and they said, so what's going on? We're not doing the deal. And they said, we're not? So I was going to be the CEO of the new company. The CEO of the other company didn't want to do the deal. Plain and simple. That was really what killed the deal. And the board of directors of the other company didn't want to do a deal that the CEO didn't want to do, which is probably the proper thing to do. So we were crushed. We were disappointed. We couldn't, resuscitate that deal. It was dead at that point in time. I'm back on the road looking for a partner. In 1996, so October of 1996, close to a year later, I meet for the first time with the chairman and CEO of a company called Open Vision. Open Vision was a public company at that time, as was Legato. It was a Warburg-backed company that was a roll-up of a lot of different systems management things. They wanted to be the next CA for UNIX, which I thought was a terrible idea. Like, who wants to be a CA anyway? Because it's like a crap. Remember I said software that does stuff and watches stuff? They're in the watching business, right? They're not in the does stuff business. So it was a crappy business anyway. But that was the kind of plan of record for the company. They were struggling. Their best product was their backup product. I met with the chairman, a guy named Jeff Squire, who had been a senior executive at Oracle, a very prominent guy in the industry. And he went back to his board of directors, to his principal investor, Warburg Pincus, a guy named Bill Janeway, and said, we ought to do the deal and Mark Leslie ought to run the company, because I had the strategy. So we went through this kind of lengthy, difficult negotiation. We agreed to give them a third of our company in stock to do a pooled transaction. Do you remember those pooling?
I don't know what that is.
Pooling is it's an accounting treatment that says we're going to give them a third of our stock, but it's not considered cash. We're going to, like, from an accounting point of view, treat it like it always was one company. So there's no what's called goodwill that goes on the balance sheet. It's a very clean transaction. They don't do that anymore. It's a long story. So we did this. We kind of crafted this agreement. We worked on it and worked on it and worked on it, and we finally executed the agreement in April of 1997. Our stock went down by 65%.
Wow.
Our investors called my board of directors and said, fire that moron, he's ruining a great company. The moron would be me. Mm-hmm. I had invested, at that point in time, 4 years with my board of directors talking about this strategy, so they were totally on board. It was, never any, and we had been executing well. Veritas at the end of 1996 was $36 million business, and nice business. But now we're thinking we can get to 60 instead of 50, but still we're worried about this thing. We finally end up, it was because the stock went down so much, the other guys got nervous, and I remember at the last minute, their investor called me up and said, we need to renegotiate the deal. And I said, what's changed? He said, the stock price is down. I said, what's changed between the relative value of the two companies and the strategy going forward? Like nothing, right? So I had this long conversation, and we ended up doing some management positioning changes, but we didn't change the price or anything like that. I was adamant. I said, I'm not changing the price. I mean, just, we're not doing that, period. So we ended up closing the deal. It was kind of very tense when we closed the deal on all sides. It was a very tense. Everybody was nervous. The stock was down. We had to make some concessions at the last minute. I mean, it was a very difficult closing. And now we got this 30. They were 36 million. We were 36 million. We only wanted their backup product. They had a bunch of other things that we ended up shedding over the next year or so. So of the 36 million, we only actually captured 20 million of that in terms of real value to the company. We had a major cultural clash between the two companies. Veritas was this comfy little software company in one building. Every quarter, we called up our OEMs, and they told us how much the next quarter's revenue was going to be. There's not a lot of suspense. There was no end of quarter, like, oh, we're going to go make a deal. And the other guys, they were all ex-Oracle, kind of hotshot sales guys, and they were believed in command and control, and we believed in, kind of getting everybody into the same page. There's a big, big cultural difference between the company. The guy who was the kind of the spiritual leader of that company at that time was running sales, because it was a sales-driven company totally. And he had been told that he was going to be the president of the company, get promoted to president of the company. And he had not been privy to the conversation of acquisition until it was announced. So the spiritual leader of the company just lost his job. The company got acquired, and he knew nothing about it. It was really a tough situation for me. I called him up right after the thing. We were starting to, put everybody in the same building and everything like that. And I said, look, we need to go out to lunch. And we made an appointment. And we went out to lunch. And I said, Paul, I said, look, I said, I thought about this. And I said, we got a lot of integration work to do to get these two companies to work together. And my conclusion is that if you want this to work, it will work. And if you don't want this to work, it's not going to work. And I hope you do the right thing. And I don't have anything else to say. Let's have lunch. I didn't have anything else to say. That was it. I mean, I felt like he was the person, he was the one person that could make the difference. I should tell you a little story. Prior to, about 3 weeks prior to signing the final papers, I called a meeting of 35 people in the company, opinion leaders, not necessarily managers or executives, but people who carried weight in the community. And I closed the door and I said, everybody's got to sign a non-disclosure agreement. Anybody who doesn't want to sign a non-disclosure agreement has to leave. We're going to tell you some inside information. We're a public company. You cannot tell anybody, including spouse, friends, whatever. If you don't want to be here, leave. Now, nobody's going to leave with that introduction, right? I mean, how juicy is this secret, right?
Everyone's leaning in.
Yeah. So we shut the door, and I said, look, we're getting ready to, we've got a handshake on a deal. The lawyers are working on the papers. We're probably going to sign this thing in 3-4 weeks from now. I want to tell you everything we told both boards of directors. So we're going to do a presentation to you for the next hour and a half that goes into the details of everything we've thought about. And this has been, the idea of it had been socialized in the company before. And I said to him, I said, look, this is your company as much as it is my company. If you all don't want to do this, we're not going to do this. Which is like, how can you say that? When our outside attorney got wind of the fact that we were having this meeting, he said, well, you can't do that. I said, well, why not? He said, well, this is very, very critical inside information. It's going to leak. I said, it's who we are. We're a company where we have a very high covenant of trust in this company. And it is who we are, and we have to do this. I have to do this. And he said, well, I have to tell your board. I didn't say tattletale. I said, well, you have to do what you have to do, and I have to do what I have to do. So we went ahead and did this meeting.
Did you feel at risk at that? With not from, you said you have a covenant of trust, but did you feel that there would be, were you willing to follow through and not do the deal if there had been that response?
I believed we had built a great deal of trust in the past. I believe that we had socialized this idea. I wanted to tell them this was going to be a difficult merger. It was going to be, and I said to them, I said, I believe that, some of who we are will be lost. I hope we will gain new things that are of value, but we will not be the same people, we will not be the same company in a year from now that we are today. And we all cherish this company today, but this is the price of doing something that was important to the company. And I wanted their fingerprints on this because I knew it was going to be controversial. The implementation of it would be controversial. And I said that a little bit with my heart in my throat, but I also believed that they would believe in us. I did believe that. I didn't plan on saying it, it just came out. It was kind of weird. But we had, over a long period of time, built, as I said, a covenant of trust in the company that we told people everything, and we let them opine on things that were important to them, and we respected that. And that's who we were. I mean, that was very much my belief of leadership was that kind of style. So we did this. When there was no leakage, you know. I didn't get in trouble with my board. It was all good. And we announced the deal. Our stock went down by 65%. It was actually winding its way down along the way because, we announced the deal and then the stock went down by 65%. And from the time you announced the deal until the time you physically closed the deal, there's time difference, and that's when they went to try to renegotiate during that period of time. So when you sign a definitive agreement, you basically have to make an announcement, but the closing of it requires stockholder approval and all kinds of other things. So there's a time delay to it. That's when they wanted to renegotiate the deal. Anyway, so we closed the deal. The following year was the most difficult year I experienced in business by far. People in the Open Vision crew were determined to get me fired so they get their old leader back. People in the old Veritas crew would come into my office and say, "Hey, they're trying to get you fired. What are you going to do about that? You need to tell them what to do." And I said, "Well, if I tell them what to do, then we are them, because they're a command and control company, and we are no longer us. Why do we want to do that?" I said, "I think what we need to do is set a good example and hope that they get to understand that over time." So we had to, kind of bite our tongue and do that. It was a very painful thing to do. I remember, I have an interesting memory, right after we kind of closed the deal, we had a meeting with all their managers and all our managers. We went up to Lake Tahoe and we gave everybody, tchotchkes and T-shirts and two is better than one and all this stuff you do. And we made all these presentations. We're up in the snow and everything like that. And the end of the first day, and we're all rehearsed and we're looking at these presentations and we're all trying to get everybody to work together and telling them what these plans are and everything. And at the end of the day, there's this, like 4 o'clock in the afternoon, there's like a little disturbance in the back of the room. And then the little disturbance turns into a fist fight. And then the fist fight turns into a brawl. And we're sitting there saying, "Oh my God, what do we have on our hands over here?" It was the two regional sales managers from the federal district that got, they're like, sales guys, right? They're always walking around like this. They got into a fight, and then everybody joined in. It was terrible. It was a nightmare. All our work, all day long, and this is a result of it. So that's how we started off our integration.
These were two people from the new.
One person from each company.
Oh, one from each.
Yeah.
Oh, geez.
Who were both
in the same region.
They were both the regional manager in the same location.
Got
right?
it.
And of course, we all know one of them is not going to be in the job in a year from now, right? So they were all everybody's trying to fight for position and everything. It was horrible. So that's how, it was a very, very, very difficult year for me. Everybody was very tense for a long period of time. About a year later, we were at a meeting of all of the director level and above in the company, a management meeting. We were still running the company and doing all the things, even with all the tension and everything like that. And finally, the North American sales manager for the company, the number 2 spiritual leader on their side, raises his hand during the meeting and he says, "Mark," he says, you make this presentation to all the new employees about the values and who we are, and you talk about the culture of the company, but we've never heard that presentation." Yes. I said, "Well, I'm going to do it right now." And everybody got real quiet, and I did the presentation, and that was the day the integration was over. That was the day that we became one company. And the company we became had the values of covenant of trust and openness, and it also had the characteristic of the drive and determination and competitive spirit of Open Vision. So it became a company that was the best of the both. And we all became very proud of that, actually, that it worked out that way. It was really quite amazing, We finished our first year, and then we were 36 million plus 36 million. is 72 million minus about 20, it's about $50 million. So we finished that year at $120 million. Our stock went back up.
I had a question about the
Please.
stock, if I could.
Yeah.
Why do you think there was such such sharp decline? Was that something that you had thought might happen, or did that seem like a real surprise?
It was. We thought they might go down, but not that much.
Yeah.
I mean, it was very, very disruptive to us. It was surprising how. So there's two things happened. First things that happen is that they look at Veritas, and they know the story of the, of the train schedule and everything like that, and they're confident in who we are, and our stock had been doing very well for a long period of time. OpenVision was a problem company. OpenVision was, the jury was out on that company, and it had made their numbers, but it never really kind of convinced people that it was going to be a great company. So they looked at them as two equally valued companies where the merchandise on this side was better quality, a higher quality merchandise than the merchandise on that side. Number one. Number two, there is a strong belief that mergers of equals blow up, which it almost did, right? I mean, because of the culture class. One of my directors said, a merger of equals, he said, it's kind of like a collision of two garbage trucks. You have this visual of all this stuff flying off. And then the third, let me see, there was a third, the third issue was that we, quote, paid too much, that it was too expensive a deal. So those are the three issues that were overhanging the company at that time. Now, I come to believe, with my experience in business, that paid too much is something that every investor says about every deal. And when a deal is strategic, as this one was, I told you the background of what, this is our future. This idea of getting into the backup business, this backup product they had was 20 years old. It had originally been developed by CDC. It was a world-class enterprise product. It was a great product. This was our future. This was a strategic deal for the company. And when companies do strategic deals, what you pay is not as important. Is not important at all. It's whether it works or not. If it works, the increase in value is so great that it's irrelevant what you paid. And if it doesn't work, the catastrophe is great no matter what you paid. So what you paid isn't what's important. What's important is it the right strategy and can you execute it? That's what makes the difference. So I didn't really think about the price being too high or too low. It was a price I proposed to get the deal done. They accepted the price and we moved on. But that was one of the things, you get criticized by the investors. They pay too much. By the way, I came to believe over running a public company for 8 years that there are no investors out there who do not think they're smarter than every manager they ever met. It is the way of the world. And there are no actually investors anymore. They're only traders. It's proven to me by the fact that our stock went down by 65% essentially overnight. People just hit the sell button. All these investors, these good friends, you're gone. So that's the way of the world. It's okay. So anyway, we finished the year at $120 million. It's pretty nice. We're heroes again. Everybody liked us again.
But the heroic story is it's such a seemingly improbable outcome.
There's more.
Well,
Let me
there's more,
finish.
but you said it was the hardest year of your life.
Totally.
You have this integration. It started in fisticuffs. So how are you able to execute for driving high sales with all this turmoil?
I and the team that we had was a very driven performance team. It was our business to go do this stuff, and we went and did it. I mean, we made 44 quarters in a row. We always beat our numbers, right? I can talk about that separately. But we were, very, very, very driven company, very driven. Let me finish the story.
Please.
The following year, we did $200 million. So 36, 120, 200. we then got engaged. So if you remember back in the original discussion, I said the strategy was to get into the NT space. Now we knew it was the NT space. We didn't know it was NT OS2. There's a little OS2 sidebar, but not worth talking about. So we want to get into the NT space. We've actually crafted a deal with Microsoft at this point in time that they are now going to bundle a light version of our volume manager into NT. So we've got kind of a foothold into the marketplace. We want to sell full versions of this thing as we did in the Sun marketplace, but we don't have any channel to do this. And we needed to get a channel. Building a channel is risky. We needed to get a channel that could sell a $1,000 product into the NT space. There's a million products that go into the Microsoft space that are $69 and $100, but we only identified 3 companies that were selling $1,000 products into the NT space: Citrix, CA, and Seagate. CA and Seagate both had captive companies that were selling backup software, and Citrix was another business. And CA was, on Long Island. That speaks for itself. For me, I'm from Long Island. I'm from Queens. Anyway, I wanted to do a deal with Seagate, and I called up the CEO of Seagate. I would call them up pretty much every quarter and say, we want to do a deal. We want to buy your backup business from you. Now, Seagate was a hardware disk company that owned a software business that had 2 divisions. One was a business intelligence division, and one was a backup, essentially a storage business, storage software business. And I wanted to buy that piece. And he said to me, he said no, and he said no, and he said no, and he said no. And then finally one day he said, well, why don't you go talk to the president of that division and see if you guys want to do a deal, and then we can talk about it. So I said, great. So I go meet this guy, and I kind of lay out the strategy. It's a great strategy. We're going to get into the NT backup space. We're now dominant in the UNIX space, and we're going to have a pincer movement, and we're going to take out everybody in between. And we're going to build an integrated up and down. You can start at the bottom and go up. You can be on the top and use this stuff in your, what they call small of large, right? Which is, branch offices and things like that. It's a great strategy. I lay all this out for him. It's a great strategy. They couldn't get up market, and we couldn't get down market, and who's in the center of the market is Legato, right? They're going both ways. And Legato is impinging on their NT space at this point in time. So we go and we kind of talk through this whole strategy, and we decide that it's an interesting deal. And he goes away, and he comes back 3 weeks later, and we sit down and we meet, and he said, well, the banker said we can't do it. And I said, well, why can't we do it? Well, 2 reasons. First of all, extricating this company, this as an entity, out of the rest of the company is so complicated and so risky that it'll never happen, number 1. And number 2, if we do this deal, we can't do a pooled transaction. I just talked about that in a minute. As a result of that, because of the price of the deal, we're going to have this amortization on our balance sheet that has to be, we have this goodwill on our balance sheet that has to be amortized every quarter. We're never going to make money again. We're going to have red ink. We're going to have GAAP reports that show losses every quarter for at least the next 5 years, if not longer. And, we can't do a deal like that. He explains all this to me, and I said, get new bankers. He said, what do you mean? I said, we can do this deal. Just go get new bankers. We'll figure out a way. So he comes back 2 weeks later and he said, the banker said they could do it. I said, I'm shocked. Right? I'm shocked to hear that. So we went around to our, the way the Wall Street works is that you have an investment banker who talks to the company. You have an analyst who writes about the company. we couldn't talk to the analysts because that would be inside information, but we could talk to the bankers. So we called up like 7 or 8 bankers, and we said, look, we're thinking about doing this thing. It's going to be a purchase transaction. We're going to have $1 gazillion of goodwill. There's going to be red ink forever. We want to know, we want you to ask anonymously of your analyst if they would permit us to do a pro forma presentation of our financials, because we're making cash hand over foot. And just as an FYI, the amortization is the plug number that the accountants use to balance the book. So you buy a company that has $10 million of assets on its balance sheet. You buy them for $100 million. The difference between those two numbers is $90 million, and they call that goodwill. That's the non-hard assets that you, but it's a plug number and it has no business meaning whatsoever. And everybody kind of who knows accounting knows this, right? So I say go to your analyst and ask them the question and come back and tell us the answer. And they all came back and said it would be okay. So we ended up doing this deal with Seagate. We bought them. They were $200 million and we were $200 million in arrears in 1998. And we closed the deal. Our stock went down by 75%.
Same factors.
New factor. Goodwill, you're going to have red ink forever. Merger of equals, you pay too much, they didn't really have any insight into what the Seagate business was, because that piece wasn't a public company. I said, hey, remember me? All you guys you sold, if you stuck with me, you would have made $1 gazillion. The stock went, it was a rocket ship after that. To no avail. Stock went down 75%.
Oh.
We closed the deal. They had this. They had about. We're both much bigger companies at this time. They had about 25. President, VPs, junior VPs, whatever. They had a pretty big executive staff. And our intention was to do what we did last time, was to basically integrate everybody and build a company that was the best of both. During our year of integration, we discovered that the best people don't go to work for a division of a software company that's a division of a hardware company. They're B players. This company had 42. This company was the first company to have an NT backup product. They started out with 100% market share. They were at 42% market share. They were growing 30% in a market that was growing 50%. And CA had now 48%. Cheyenne now had 48% of the market. So they were essentially, although they were growing 30% and feeling, patting themselves on the back, they were losing share every quarter. We inherited this. We ended up, it's very interesting, these two integrations. At the end of a year, we had 4 people left of the 25.
Wow.
So, we didn't, it wasn't like we didn't have a Saturday Night Massacre. It was just, one at a time. We made decisions and just happened that way. So, over the next 18 months, we took our market share in the NT space from 42% to 72%.
In how long?
In 18 months.
And how that is quite a swing.
Yeah, it's a market that's driven by distribution and resellers. We inherited 21,000 resellers and about 12 of these very, very large distributors that distribute into that marketplace. And that market can swing. We basically restructured our entire go-to-market so that it was extraordinarily channel-friendly to the distributors and to these resellers up and down the line, and that worked great. And we basically took market share, and we finished that year at $712 million.
Stunning.
Including the all of the kind of integration stuff that's going on, right? Everybody's worried about their job, and they're talking at the coffee machines, what goes on, right, in these companies. So we finished the year at $700 million.
So So that jump was 200 to 700.
200 plus 200, 700. So the guys that sold, they weren't smart. The guys that bought were very smart. They made a lot of money.
What did the stock do?
Oh, it was this was in 2000. So we closed this deal in '99. In 2000, do you remember the original valuation of the company was $64 million?
Yeah.
In the height of the bubble in 2000, $64 billion.
Oh my goodness.
1,000 times. So we closed the deal. We did $712 million. That was in 1999. In 1999, something else happened as well. I'm pretty sure it was 1999. We were head to head with Legato, our old romantic partner, on every single deal in the marketplace. Because we had now, when we did the deal with OpenVision, they were 3 times our size. But we had made, you could see the numbers, we had done really well in the marketplace, and we had moved on, and we were very, very competitive in the marketplace. I think at this point in time, 1999, 2000, we were 3 times their size. That's how well we had done. And we were head to head in every single deal in the marketplace. And I remember I said to our sales executive, I said, look, I want to know at the end of the quarter, I want you to track this carefully, every deal we won and lost against Legato, and for how much. So I want to get an absolutely clearest possible picture of their revenue. And to come back in and report at the end of the quarter one, and I write an email to the board saying I think they missed their quarter, And then they made their quarter, and it's like, oh, okay. I mean, we must have missed something. We have to double our efforts to figure out what's going on. So we double our efforts, and the end of quarter 2, I write a note that says I think they missed a quarter, and they make their quarter. At the end of quarter 3, we do this all over again. We think they missed a quarter, but I'm embarrassed to write to the board. I don't say anything. I just kind of let that go. And at the end of quarter 4, and this is a fascinating thing to me. At the end of quarter 4, they announce that they're going to postpone their earnings call by a week, and that they missed quarter 4, and that was the announcement. They didn't give any numbers, and then a week later they announced that they actually missed quarter 1, 2, and 3 also.
And what was their explanation for their previous reporting?
You could go look at their announcement at the time, but it was like the interesting question is, how come I knew and he didn't? The guy running that company, and I know why I didn't know, because in my company. When I had to place my office, we were building a new building. They say, where do you want your office? I said, you go build the building first, lay it all out, and I'll tell you where I want my office. So you lay the whole thing out and show me the picture, and I'll tell you. And I said, I want my office, when they finally showed me, I said, I want my office on the 2nd floor, near the conference rooms, near the bathrooms, near the coffee bars, right near the stairs, right near the elevator. I want to be in the highest traffic location in the building. And I want glass on my door. And for 9 years, I didn't have an assistant or a secretary working for me. You want to talk to me, talk to me.
Really?
And my door is open, and I'm visible to everybody. And that's who I was as a CEO. And I knew him well because I was romancing him for the better part of a year. And in order to see him, you had to go through into a separate area where he had 2 secretaries, and in the back of that room, in the back of that corridor, there was his office, isolated. That's why I knew, and that's why he didn't know. People did not want to tell him bad news, so they were cooking the books and stuff like that. And it's instructive about how the philosophy of leadership. And I used to go around to town hall meetings and say to my the people in the company, I say, look, I got paid to fix broken stuff, so I'm here to find out what's broken. Because if I don't have broken stuff to fix, I don't have a job. So please help me. So truly, I mean, but he didn't want to hear the bad news. So that company blew up, and they got sold to EMC. First of all, the entire management team got fired. They brought in this new management team, and the company got eventually sold to EMC at a fraction of its prior value. So we took out our principal competitor in the marketplace.
Did you ever think about trying to acquire them?
Then? No. Why would I
that?
acquire them? I would have killed them, right?
Okay.
Yeah, so I didn't think about it, but might have been okay to do that, but I didn't even think about it. Like we were doing our stuff, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and then they went to EMC. They were never a problem for us after that. After that. The world is very unforgiving. A company has that kind of catastrophic failure, and it's over for that company. So 1999, we did $712 million. Legato was off the map. In the year 2000, we did $1.2 billion in revenue. We became a Fortune 1000 company. Fortune 999. Better than 1001.
Yeah.
We just made the threshold. I told my board actually 2 years prior that I was looking for an exit personally. Not in a bad way. I just said, look, I think I want to go do something, other things. They told me that they wouldn't do the Seagate deal without me. I said I'll stay because I thought it was central to the company. The Seagate deal was done. We finished it in 1999. In 2000, I said it's time to go start a search, and they said okay. And to give you, my sense of it is that I think I told you the story about how I discovered that you could actually go start and build a company, and that I had this dream when I was 23 years old, and I wanted to go do this stuff, So here I am, I'm 55 years old, and I turn around and I say, I've actually done what I wanted to do. And I'm actually now free for the first time to do other things. Internally, a sense of freedom. Because up until that point in time, I was only doing this. There was no, this is my life, right? And now I'm free to do other things. And I said I want to do other things. There's a little anecdote here. So when we were on our roadshow, our IPO roadshow in 1993, I don't know if you ever been on roadshows. You lose track of time and place when you're on a roadshow because you're just being carried around from place to place to place. I remember, we were on a roadshow, we're in this car someplace, and I says, anybody know where we actually are? Because you have no idea. You just lose complete track of this thing. So we're in a car, and there's me and our CFO, and then there's a banker from each of the two companies that are taking us public, and we're just sitting there talking, and we say, well, if you could be anything you wanted to be and you weren't what you are today, what would you be? We're just a little parlor game, in just to, because we're just talking to each other. And one guy says he'd be a high school football coach. And this is 1993, and I said, for no reason that I can think of, I said, well, I would like to teach in business school. And it was the first time that thought had ever occurred to me. It just fell out of my mouth, and then I said, that's kind of interesting, So in the year, so after that, actually, I said, well, someday I might want to do this, so I ought to see if I can find an opportunity to teach at Stanford, since it's 4 miles from my house, and it's one of the world's greatest business schools. I don't know a soul there, but I'm sure someone on my board knows someone there, so I think I'll just go and do that, go see if I can find someone. So I finally, got a contact, and I said, look, I'm a CEO of a company, I don't have a lot of time, but someday I'd like to teach, and can we build a relationship? Is there lightweight things I can do? So starting in 1994, I started building a relationship at Stanford. And one of the things I wanted to do when I said I wanted to retire, I said I wanted to teach. I wanted to go and do that. It was something that was the next thing in my life, right? So I wasn't planning on going, to, grow flowers in the garden. Have coffee at 10 o'clock in the morning. I wasn't, that wasn't my idea, but I just said, there's other things I can do, and I just want to make time in my life to do that. So, so we recruited a new CEO. We recruited the number 2 person at Oracle. We said, we really want to be able to take this company from $1 billion to whatever to $5 billion. Let's go look at the biggest software companies and see if we can find an executive who can do that. We couldn't do a lot of background checking because in Oracle, if they know you're looking around, they fire you, and then you lose your stock options that haven't yet vested. So we had this candidate, number 2 guy, big reputation. We ended up making an offer. We hired him. I believe today that it was a mistake for the company to do that, and I was the author of it, so my mistake. But we gave him, having the experience that we had in '94 of building the company on strategic transformation, we were now ready to go to the next phase. We had thought about this and said we know what we want to do. We had defined it. We had defined, the horizon for the company for the next 5 to 10 years. And we said we wanted to acquire VMware.
Oh.
And I was on the board of VMware. And when I was a man-child, I actually architected the first ever software hypervisor. So I actually, understood this stuff. We were the perfect acquirer. They were a $50 million company. We were a $1 billion company, billion-plus company. We were, so we could acquire them. The cost of acquiring them was nothing. We were Silicon Valley, which is a cultural thing. We were all software, which is another cultural thing. We had our distribution channel in place to the entire world, so we could accelerate the future of the company. And I had the relationship with the CEO, and we really liked each other, and that was kind of a layup. So the company, so that was part 1 of the strategy, and part 2 of the strategy that we had defined at that time was to acquire the Linux enterprise properties, that would be Red Hat, MySQL, JBoss, build a complete enterprise stack and compete with Microsoft in the enterprise operating system business. So the Veritas would be a storage management, virtualization, operating system, 3-pillar company. We could take a moment of silence there.
Yeah.
It was a great strategy. The company, had we done that, I don't know what the next transformation, but had we done that, the company would have emerged as a $10 billion competitor to Microsoft. I mean, a major player in the industry. And $100 billion market cap, no question about it. So the new guy came in saying, I'm the new Larry Ellison. Remember I described my office? His office was different. So his office, we had actually just built a new building, and I had just built an office there, but he changed the office. He instead of having a door to the hallway from his office, he built a door to his assistant's office, and in order to get into his office, you had to go past his assistant. It's kind of like the guy at Legato, right? And he put a bathroom in his office. So he's like the new Larry Ellison, he's like, I'm so special. But he really believed he was going to be a strategist, and because we had given him the strategy and it was my idea, not his idea, he didn't think it was a good idea. So he didn't do the VMware deal. This is a few years later, and I actually left the board shortly after that because I was so disappointed and frustrated with the future of the company. There were 3 bites at the apple for the VMware deal. The first time Veritas competed with Symantec ended up acquiring the company for $635, and Veritas didn't meet that bid. When that deal, and then Symantec walked away from the deal, and they got back together again, and Veritas said, the company said, we'll sell the company for $650, and Veritas said $635. And then they couldn't agree on that, and so that deal didn't happen.
Ooh.
And then a few months later, EMC showed up, and I called up Veritas and I said, look, I can't tell you the name, but there's a new acquirer. The price is higher, and you won't like the name, so you need to go pay attention. And they didn't do the deal. And it was shortly after that I said, this is just hopeless. You know, it's never great things are never going to happen here. I mean, another little story. They came in after, about the time they weren't buying VMware, they decided they wanted to buy a company called Precise Software. Precise Software was an Israeli company. And remember my 3 categories? 100% in category 2.
Okay.
So they come into the board meeting and they kind of lay out this plan. They got all these crappy little, modules that do these different things and at low prices. And they're going to buy this company for $500 million. And they make this whole presentation. It's all pre-cooked. I don't know it's pre-cooked. Nobody spent any time with me. It's all pre-cooked. They've been kind of laying this out for a while. And I'm sitting at the board meeting. I said, why would anybody want to buy that company? It's which is not a good thing to say. But anyway, they ended up buying the company. They ended up selling it back to the original founders for $1. I mean, it was such a disaster for the company. It was unbelievable. So the company. I mean, I had a vision of where the company ought to go, and this guy was taking it to a different place. And it was just not. You're on a board of directors. You lead, you follow, you get out of the way. I mean, so I just decided to leave. I just was very unhappy. And that was the end of my time with Veritas.
Could you discern which different tack the new person, the new CEO was
There was
taking?
no different tack strategically. Okay. I mean, he was, I believe in that he was a great operating. He's a very smart guy. He was a great operating executive. Some people in the company described him as, and he made a lot of contribution to kind of making the company more efficient, but people said, all the trains run on time. The problem is they go in a circle. And that was probably a pretty good description of who he was. He's not a well-liked person in the company, but very, very good operating executive, but not CEO material, not, someone who, he didn't have the personal leadership skills and he didn't have the strategic thinking, but as a number 2 to Larry Ellison, you don't need that because he's got all that stuff, right? So a couple of years later, he decided to sell the company to Symantec. It was a deal that was done for the 2 people who did the deal, John Thompson and Gary Bloom. Both did it for reasons that were personal, not business. John Thompson was already leaving. Was well understood that he was on his way out to retirement. He'd built a great company, and this is an opportunity to double the size of the company. Veritas stock was low, their stock was high. It was an easy acquisition for them. They became the 3rd largest software company in the industry, the stroke of a pen. Gary was worn out from Sarbanes-Oxley, which was very, very hard on the CEOs at that time, and had not been able to prove to himself that he could find a strategy for the company. And by selling the company, you get an exit where you get yourself fully vested. You get a change in control vesting, and you get an exit. It's very hard to resign as a CEO. I mean, it's the most difficult thing in the world. You're in prison as a CEO. So this was an exit for him, a profitable one. So both of these guys did this deal. There was never any synergy there. And every time they wanted to talk to Wall Street, the stock went down more. I had sold my last shares, I think, like a week before they announced the deal. I had sold my last shares in the company. So I was, it had no meaning to me. And eventually the deal closed. It was never successful acquisition. And in February of last year, the company separated into 2 companies, Symantec and Veritas, in a private equity buyout by Carlyle. And now I'm on the board of that new company.
Oh. The new Veritas. Interesting.
I'm a board advisor. I actually didn't want to be on the board, but It was I was not sure. I mean, I had a lengthy discussion with Carlisle saying, like, my objective to be involved and your objective to have me involved are not consistent. You want to, add luster to the deal. You want me because I understand the industry. I said, but for you, you have, $700 million of cash flow. You pay off your debts. You clean things up. You get your EBITDA up. You sell the company and you get 3x and you call it a home run, and you got CA on your hands. And I said, unless there's some, resurrection of greatness in the company, for me personally, that has no interest. I have no interest in making money for you guys. Nothing personal, right? I mean, it's just not something interesting to me. But we talked about that, and I said, look, instead of board director, why don't you just make me an advisor to the board of directors, and that way if I decide to leave, it will be invisible. And we decided to go ahead and do that. It's worked out okay. I've been having a good time there.
I'm sorry, Marguerite.
Go ahead.
No,
Go ahead,
please.
please.
Is it the same pieces put back together in the new
Pretty
Veritas?
much. The disappointing part is when I left my last year as chairman, we finished the year at $1.5 billion. That was the year of the nuclear winter. I remember that Siebel Systems in the year 2000 was a $2 billion company, and the year 2001 was an $800 million company. Veritas went from 1.2 to 1.5 and made 25% operating margins. I mean, it was a great year for us in the face of that adversity. When they left Symantec, so they was acquired in 2005 and they left in 2016, 11 years later, you remember the scorching growth rate we had, right? So it went from 1.5 to 2.2 in 11 years. As compared to the plan I had.
So Mark, as you tell the story, your voice stays level, and yet I can't imagine what that feels like to have this life vision, and you've had
it's not.
I mean, you've gone from glory to
No.
So
Look, I look back at this and say, I'm deeply disappointed that it didn't meet a greater destiny, but at the same time, I have no personal regrets that I left when I did. I could have stayed another 10 years, but they wanted me. They asked me after they made him CEO. They asked me a few times if I want to go back. I didn't want to do that. I said I've done in my life what I want to do, and I'm good. I'm good. So I have disappointment, not regret, if that makes sense to you.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, I'm okay with it. It is what it is. Whenever you leave, you cede control, and you don't know what the outcome's going to be. It's okay.
You had this idea that you articulated in 1994 you might like to teach. So tell us how you actually began at the Stanford Graduate School of Business.
So I didn't know anybody at Stanford in the 90s, and I called up and started calling people I knew and say, do you know anybody at Stanford? And they finally introduced me to a guy named Chuck Holloway, who was a very senior person in the school. They don't have seniority, but in terms of his role of changing things and getting things done, and he and a guy named Irv Grossbeck had built this entrepreneurial initiative in the school. I met originally Irv, and Irv said, go talk to Chuck. Chuck was kind of the gatekeeper on new lecturers, non-tenure track practitioners, they call them. So I had worked with them, and we had built a case around Veritas, and I was a class guest, and I had done some mentoring and some business plans. This is while I was working as a CEO, this lightweight stuff I talked about. And then finally I came in, and I said, I'm ready if you guys are. And I said when we started, I said, when someday in the future, I'll want to teach, you'll have an opinion, I'll have an opinion, and we can do what we want to do. So the first reaction was, well, we don't have anything for you, but I can introduce you to someone at Berkeley if you're interested. So I said, you bet. And I was very inspired about teaching. My experience at HBS in case teaching, I thought there was an amazing amazing way to learn is through these cases, and I really could see myself doing that. So so I got a contact over there, and I ended up teaching in the first semester. I taught at Berkeley. It was unbelievably painful because I was teaching, co-teaching with one of their professors over there. The class was from 6 to 9 on 1 day a week, and I live in Portola Valley. And if you leave at 4 o'clock, you're late for class.
Yeah.
So I had to leave at 3 o'clock so I could get there at 4:30, so I could hang around for an hour and a half, so I could, go to class. And the class was, had they did two episodes every class, two sections every class, and then you get out at 9 o'clock and you got to drive home. I mean, it's just horrible. It was just a nightmare. But it was my chance, right? I wasn't going to go give up the chance. So I did that, and I don't know if it was Berkeley or it might have been Berkeley. So one of them sent me to suggested I go take this class in how to teach cases by this guy named Timmons, who was at Babson, who was one of the great entrepreneurial case teachers. He was, and he taught a class in teaching entrepreneurship, right? And I was very inspired by that as well, kind of how you think about teaching a case. Anyway, they called me back up at Stanford and they said, "Oh, we have this, we have this opportunity. We want to teach this. We have an oversubscription for this class where they're teaching people how to build a business plan. Would you be able to take on another section of it, or maybe not a section, but maybe you can do like a two credit seminar thing?" And I said, sure. So that was my first time teaching there. And then the following, they have quarters over there. The following quarter, they said, we'd actually like to start another section of our flagship course in entrepreneurship, S353, which was Formation of New Ventures. That was the first course they did in entrepreneurship, and it's been the one that spawned all the other courses and the reputation of the school. So Chuck and a guy named John Morgridge were teaching this class together, and they asked me if I would teach another section of the same class in the spring quarter. And I was just dying for the opportunity, and I said, absolutely. And so they got me involved with the planning, where they were talking about this case and that case, and they kept asking me what I thought, and I said, I have no idea what any of these cases do, so why don't you guys decide what you want to do, and I'll just do what you do. So my first time really teaching at Stanford was in, it was in the spring of 2001, and I was teaching Formation of New Ventures, a 4-credit course, and the plan was that I was going to go to their class in the morning, which is a 10 o'clock class, and then at 1 o'clock I would teach the same case. I would watch them, and then whoever taught that case that day would watch me, and then we'd talk at the end of the day. That was my first year doing this. And I was alone in the classroom. I had no, most practitioners start teaching with in a buddy system, right? But I said, okay, I'll do it. I mean, whatever. So teaching is very, very, very time consuming, and teaching the first time is even more time consuming. So I was spending 20 hours for each case, and I was doing 2 cases a week, 20 hours of preparation, So they would give me their notes, and I would read the case, and then I'd read their notes, and then I would just develop my own notes, which is my own take on things and the things I wanted to talk about. And I was new at this, and and so it was a very, very, very strenuous exercise for me. And I remember teaching the very first case, so I'd watch them teach. I would have my own notes. I would watch what they do, and I'd have their notes. And then over lunch, I would mark up my notes, right, to any changes I want to do, and then I would go in and teach the class. That was the plan of record. We did that for 20 cases. So at the end of my first session, Chuck Holloway, who taught the case in the morning, and then I taught it in the afternoon, and he watched me teach it. And very nice man, and I'm very fond of him. And I was looking for some mentoring at that point in time, and we talked about a few different things. And he said, "Oh yeah," he said, "it'd be okay if you came out from behind the lectern from time to time." I was so nervous, I was so nervous that first time. And so anyway, I came out from behind the lectern, and we kind of went through because I worked very, very hard. The end of my the first class I ever taught, the end of the last session, the students gave me a standing ovation. I was like, it was, I changed. I teach to impact all and to inspire a few. To inspire a few people to do something they would not have otherwise done in their lives. And I've done that. I've been successful in every class. I think I inspired, one or two people to change the direction of their lives, to try something they wouldn't have otherwise done. So that was my first experience teaching. Then they said, well, how would you feel about teaching 2 sections? So, this was in I don't remember which quarter, but the next following year was like, why don't you teach 2 sections? Yeah, I could teach one at 8 o'clock and one at 10 o'clock. And I said, okay, because I really wanted to teach. Well, that was one of the most exhausting, second only to the year of integration with Open Vision. It was one of the most exhausting times I ever had in my life. I finished, and I had these 2 sections, and I finished teaching, and I went over to them. I said, I will never do that again, because I was teaching alone in this again, teaching alone, and I don't know what they were thinking. What teaching alone? We teach alone. You never get a day off. You can never have. You never alternate who teaches. You never get a little more time. It's really, 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 really intense when you teach alone. So I said I'll never do that again. I said I'm happy to do 2 sections with a partner, but I can't do it alone. It's just too much work. So I've been teaching there ever since. After, let's see, in 2003, about 3 years after I got there, I should before I do this, I should say something else. I had a really important experience in my second year of teaching. I was trying to teach a class. This is an entrepreneurship class about how companies start up, and then they build a product, and then they go to market. And when they go to market, they hire a whole bunch of salespeople, and they have a plan based on, kind of the experience of sales professionals before, which is this is how much they're going to do, and this is how many we got, and this is how long it takes them to go build this, what they call a capacity plan. They put all this stuff in place. They spend a lot of money, and then a year later, instead of making $10 million, they make $3 million, and people get fired, and it's a catastrophe from an economic point of view. And this happens over and over and over and over and over again in these companies. And I see this pattern, and I want to show it to the students to say, caution, this doesn't work, this way of doing it. And when I'm doing that, and I'm thinking about this, and I have this epiphany, which was not, I couldn't even articulate it, but I could see that what happens when you go to market is that this takes a year or so to actually figure out how to get the whole thing to work. And until you get it to work, you get no productivity out of your salespeople. So I see this analog to a manufacturing learning curve. You guys know the semiconductor business. Manufacturing learning curve, volume increases, cost declines. Every semiconductor that comes out, they get better yields. They go through this, quote, learning curve. And the interesting thing is, they all know they're going to go through the learning curve, but they actually don't know what they're going to learn until they do it, right? And then they learn this stuff, quote, learn this stuff, and then things get better and prices go down. And what I realized was the same thing was true on the go-to-market side, that as you go to market, you go through a learning curve. The whole corporation, features, functions, usability, price, ecosystem, positioning, sales model. I mean, there's a long list of things. And when you learn about all these things, and they're unique to each company and each product, what happens is that you increase sales yield, which is the analog to manufacturing cost. And as sales yield increases, as a merchantability of the product increases, sales yield increases. And when sales yield gets high enough, that's when you hire a lot of people. So I came out with this paper called The Sales Learning Curve. It was published in HBS in 2006. It took us years to actually get it written and published. But the process of doing that, of having an idea, I went to Chuck Holloway, my personal rabbi there, and I said, hey, I have this idea, and I explained it to him, and he didn't understand me, and I explained it again, and it took a while to actually articulate it, and then I said, well, this is an idea that probably exists out there, so we did a literature search, and it didn't, and then I said, could we write a paper? And I said, would you do it with me, because I don't know what to do, and so we did that together. We wrote the paper, 30, 40 times. It was really cool. We wrote it 30, 40 times, kept kind of polishing it, which is what you do in academia because they get nothing else to do. And then we give it to the HBS people, the HBS Harvard Business Review people, and they say they'll publish it, and they say we're going to give it to our editor, and they give it to their editor, and I get back from the editor, and I said, oh, this is way better than I could do. Yeah. They really know what they're doing. This is so much easier to understand, They didn't change anything. I mean, all the content was in there. It was just the way they wrote it. It was much better. It was a humbling experience. So I got that published, and then I evangelized that to the community of people in Silicon Valley. I went to every opportunity to speak that I could find. The first time I did it was at Stanford with an audience of about 400 people, and then I went to every venture capital CEO meeting and whatever, any place I could go. I presented it to about 5,000 people over a period of a year or two, and changed the. It's become a seminal paper in Silicon Valley. People who I've never met, even in different generation, actually have read the paper, and they meet me and they say, "Oh, you're the guy that wrote the paper, right?" I mean, so I have that experience, and it changed the culture of venture capital. The year after you develop and ship your first product is now a year of experimentation and tolerance, rather than a year of execution and measurement. So that has changed in the Valley, and it's changed because of that. And I remember presenting it to people. I used to present. It was a weird experience. I'm a very audience-sensitive speaker, and I would present this paper, and I had a canned pitch at this point in time, and I would always see in the audience that there would be nobody would be sitting in front of doing this, right? And then afterwards, they would all come over to me and say, "Oh, it's exactly what I experienced, and I never had the framework." And what was happening is that they were not leaning forward because they were intellectually digesting, right? It was in a sense harder work, right? But it was a very rewarding experience for me. I never thought of myself as someone who could write a paper and change the way people think. And that for me was very exciting to be able to do that. In 2003, myself and some of the other practitioners basically were complaining, whining, that why don't we teach anybody in the school about sales? Because you can't, this is a business school. We send these people out to run businesses, and they know zero. There's no course in the school that has the word sales in it.
Interesting.
Which is, it's amazing. So finally they call a meeting of about, 5 or 6 people. One of the guys in the meeting is a guy named Jim Lattin, who's a marketing professor who, I don't know how they roped him into the meeting, but he showed up. I showed up to the meeting, and I said, I have an idea what this course ought to look like, and here's 25 topics that we can build cases on. So I was like, I really had a lot of passion for this thing. And then there was, this general discussion and everything like that, and finally, I think Chuck Holloway was chairing the meeting. He said, so it sounds like you're interested, and it sounds like this marketing professor is interested, and why don't you guys go create a course? And everybody left the room. And I'm staring at him, and he's staring at me. We never met each other, And we said, okay, we're going to go make a course. We're going to go create this new course. And he was He's a guy who's created courses before. He's a tenure track guy, lovely guy, one of my favorite people in the world. And I just had lunch with him this week actually. And we started out with we started out with a 10 credit, 35 student maximum registration. You start out by putting up 10 blocks on the whiteboard that are all blank, and you say, oh, what are we going to teach, and what do we got for the way of cases? So we did this literature search. We found terrible cases, but a bad case is better than no case when you have a lot of white space. We got some cases written. We had a lot of support from the case writing department, and we started this little course. Following year, we went to 20 sessions. The following year, we did a major house cleaning and try to get rid of all the crappy cases and the ones that we wrote ourselves that didn't work. And then the following year, we went to 2 sections, and then with a full enrollment of 65 students. And then the following year, I said, let's go to 4 sections because we had a lot of demand for the course. We brought in 2 more instructors, and they watched us for a year, and then me and Jim Latin split up, and we each took one of these people, and we then became the person to coach them became their teaching partner. And after that, we did that for about 2 years, and then I said, I have to. And then I had been at that point teaching for 10 years, and when I started teaching, I said, I'll teach for 10 years and then see what I want to do. And now that it was 10 years, I said, I love teaching, but I don't want to teach 2 quarters in a row. I was teaching 2 sections of sales in the winter, 1 section of formation in the fall, and I had started a new course at that time called Real Life Ethics, and I was teaching that also in the fall. So I was teaching 14 credits, and I said, I want to teach, but I just don't want to teach 2 quarters. So do I want to teach sales and give up formation and ethics, or vice versa, is what I kind of decided. And since ethics was my newest course, I decided I wanted to continue with that. So we recruited yet another person, instructor, into the sales side, and I left the class at that point in time. It's a great class. They got 4 sections. They have 280 seats. They educate about 280 seats out of a class of 350. It's a on-demand elective. It's one of the don't leave home without it electives. Many students have said, when I think back to school, this is the most practical course I took. It's not a course about how to sell. The name of the course is Building and Managing Professional Sales Organizations. So it's a course about quotas and compensation plans and territories and district managers and going direct versus indirect. It's all the things that if you think about at a CEO level, it's designed, the target audience is a CEO, investor kind of person. What do they need to know about sales?
Right.
So I consider that to be a big accomplishment in my life. Because of the success of that, when I said I wanted to build an ethics course, they said, sounds great to me. What do you need in the way of resources? It'll do whatever you want, So now we have this, it's interesting, the ethics class is a truly great class. The students come to this class, they just love this class. But we always have trouble recruiting because it has the word ethics in it, and after their first year ethics class, they become allergic to that word.
Oh.
So this year I changed the name of the course to Dilemmas Decisions, and we now have waitlisted classes. Same class. And it's a great class. It's a labor of love. I really enjoy teaching the class a lot.
Can you tell us about some of the, you've mentioned key issues that you talked in the other one. What are the key topics you raise in this and maybe some of the cases that...
Oh, so in the ethics class...
Dilemmas and decisions class.
Yeah, decisions, dilemmas. So I think I told you about the case. I think I told you about one of the. You want me to talk about that one? Yeah.
The investment dilemma.
Traction Ventures, the investment dilemma. We have one where the chairman of a company used to be president. He became chairman, not executive chairman. He gets a call from one of the vice presidents who worked for him and now works for the new president. He used to be the COO, personal friend of this guy. And he goes to have breakfast with this person, and when he gets there, there's 2 other VPs at the table, and it's a palace revolt. We don't like what's going on. We have no plans, but if things don't change, we will make plans. And they dropped that in his lap. And making a long story short, I mean, there's a lot of detail to this thing, but making a long story short, this is a guy who was profoundly devoted to this company, this guy they want to fire. They were personal friends, they vacationed together, the kids go to school together. When the guy moved up to the area to be the COO when he was CEO, he slept in his house for 6 months. I mean, they're like this, right? And eventually this guy has to fire this guy, I mean, at the end of the case. And it really, is your loyalty to your job as chairman or to your deeply personal friend. And so it's a real heartbreaker for the students. Like, I don't think I ever want that job, right? No, seriously. I mean, it's like it's and also they find out. You find out in the case unrolls over time. You find out in the case that the reason this guy's so passionate about this company and this drug that they're building is because he has the disease that this drug solves.
The guy that gets fired.
The guy that gets fired. Yeah, I mean, it's like you can't make this stuff up, right? This is a true story. We have a topic about activist investor. We have a topic about retail. They want to go into this company builds a consumer product and they want to sell it through Walmart. And in order to sell through Walmart, you got to pass a test. The test is you put it on the shelf and then they figure out how much has been bought, and then they decide whether they want to have you on their shelves or not. This is a product they've been in business for a while. They got great distribution, and it's a good product, but they can't pass the test because the big companies basically stand out front and hand coupons to everybody and advertise on the radio and do all these things to kind of push the product. They have their people standing in there fixing up the shelves and stuff like that. And this is like a half a dozen people in this company. They just can't, and you got to do it in like 40 stores, right? So this company decides to send out their employees to buy their product for cash. And then the question, is like, this is a scrappy entrepreneur or is this unethical, right? And we have a very spirited debate. So I'm just giving you some, we do 10 of these things. We've probably written close to 20 of them by now. We have a whole bunch and we don't use it anymore. They're in inventory, but they're just great cases. They're compelling. The students have this, we unroll this story, and then when class ends, they stand out of the front of the building and in threes and fours, and they continue debating the topic because it's so compelling.
We could talk all day, Mark, but I know that you have other things waiting for you. So we'd like to turn now to another topic, which is your impact to entrepreneurs directly, people that you've served as an investor or mentor. I think it's been now tens of companies that you've been involved with.
I haven't fully counted, but I think over my career it's probably 50 or 60 companies that I've been on a board of or been an advisor to or something like that.
How do you approach that role? You've been an operating role. You've been a CEO.
So being a director is very different. It's interesting. Many people who are CEOs who become directors see the opportunities to do what they think is the right thing, and then they express that at the meeting. And they want to operate. They want to get their hands on the controls, and they're frustrated when things aren't done the way they think. I don't think that's the role of a director. I think that a director, it's very humbling to recognize that as a CEO, I thought about this business 7x24. When I decided to do things, I had lived with this idea inside me and with my team, and we had, taken it apart and put it back together 100 times, and then we said we're going to do something like these mergers and stuff like that. And you can't walk into a meeting, once every 2-3 months and get a gulp, and actually really know it the way a CEO does, number one. And number two, when you start operating the company, then the CEO, if they listen to you, becomes accountable. I have a saying I use with my students. I say, if you don't listen to your board and investors, you may or may not get fired. But if you listen to them, you'll definitely get fired. And the meaning of that is that once you start doing what they're telling you to do, what do they need you for? They really need someone to have their own ideas and to do what they want to do and then convince you that that's the right thing to do, not the other way around. And in fact, when a board recognizes the fact that the person doesn't do anything and pushes all the decisions to the board, they actually fire them and get someone new. So I think that's a true statement. So I do three things at a board or involvement with a company. Number one, I'm a go-to-market an entrepreneurial go-to-market expert. I've been doing it myself. Been doing it with other companies. I've created the courses. I've thought about this for 25 years deeply, and I have a lot of success behind me. So I really have some contribution to add. Number two, I try to inspire the company to think strategically, to look for the opportunities for transformation, to look for the opportunities that truly make a difference to transform the company to greatness. And the third thing I do is try to build a relationship with the CEO where we can talk about the things that they worry about, the issues of leadership and coaching and things like that. I am never an investor board member, and I'm never a management board member. I'm an independent board member, there's a lot. I spend a lot of my life thinking about issues of leadership, and I can really help these people a lot of the times with the issue of the day that they're dealing with. So those are the three things I do on a board. I recently, in the last year or so, I concluded that sometimes I make a little money between my options and my investment, and I usually get options and then double up by making an investment. Sometimes the company, sometimes I lose money. Neither of those cases does it make a difference. And if I make a lot of money, I actually end up giving it away. So actually, it's just a hobby now. And I'm trying to actually restrict my activities to things that are personally fascinating and interesting to me. So that's what I'm doing now. And I used to try to do, the economic value of the company used to play, something that I believe was a sure hit, which of course it never are, but something I believed was the right thing, which the great economic return would be attractive to me. Now, what's most attractive to me is something I think is changed the world, is intellectually fascinating, really cool people. That's really what I'm interested in doing right now. And because it's a hobby, when I thought of it as a hobby, I said, well, if it's a hobby, it's kind of like going back to when I was trying to figure out what I want to do in my next job as a CEO. It's like, okay, so it's a hobby. So that means I can think about it in a different way. What's important? And then I thought about what's important. So.
As you reflect on these 50, 60, is there one or two that you would like to sort of cite as something you particularly memorable to you for sort of?
Well, I mean, one of the recent really successful companies is Pure Storage. It's a great example. The guy who started Pure Storage was one of the technical founders of Veritas.
Oh.
He was the person who, from the year 1988 until, I don't know, maybe 5 years ago, was the single person in the company who was the architect of that disk product I told you about, the virtual disk, kind of. So he was the guy that built it and owned it and enhanced it, and he was a senior fellow in the company. He made a lot of money and everything like that. It was all great. And this is a perfect example of what makes a company great. So I mentioned earlier that opportunity comes from disruption. So I remember the early days of the industry when the industry transitioned from tape to disc. And when the industry ran on tape and they did the payroll application, they would have a payroll master file, which would have the name and details of every single person. They'd have a payroll item file, which would have the weekly hours and whatever else was relevant that was, put in, key punched into a tape. They would run this tape against this tape, and out on the other side would come a new tape, the new payroll master. There would become a set of checks. There would be a payroll register. There'd be tax stuff. There'd be all kinds of stuff that would come out on the other end. And then they would take this new payroll master. The old one would become the grandfather, and this one would become the father, and then they would create a new child next time. So they always had this rotation of 3, and they rotated the tapes. And when they came out with discs, they came out with removable discs that went onto drives. And when they did the payroll application, they had the payroll master disk, they had the payroll item disk, and then they created the new payroll master disk. So it was a completely, the disk, the only value of the disk was that you could access something in the center of the disk without spinning the whole disk, right? It was you'd have to do with a tape. And over 30 years, we learned how to think about disks as not as tapes, but as their own thing. And John was a guy who spent his life thinking about what I call the geometry of a disk. How many platters, how fast does it turn, how fast do the heads move in and out, how do you format the physical disk, does it make a difference? He spent his entire life thinking about the geometry of a disk. When Flash was invented, the first thing they do was they make Flash disks, which are exactly like what I described in the payroll application.
Right.
Take out your disk, put it into Flash, it works faster. John looked at Flash and said, it's a new geometry. And as a result of it being a new geometry, we need to rethink how we think about this as a medium. Now, let me give you just a little tiny piece of background over here. The company NetApp, very prominent, famous company in the Valley, built the company on an idea that was intrinsic to the geometry of the disk. So what happened in the early 80s was that companies started to build network file servers, that instead of keeping everybody's files here, let's keep them in a single place and then everybody can go get them, right? And so we built these, put in a server, put in a big disk behind it, and everybody go get their files from this big thing. And what happened when they did this is that, you have 5 people on there, the performance is good. You have 10 people on there, the performance is good. You put on the 12th person and the performance crashes for everybody. And what happened was that in this disk, in order to make it efficient for the users, you want the different segments of a file to be adjacent to each other. So when you read it, you just pick them all up one after the other. When you have people writing to the disk while people are reading the disk, the person who's writing has to go back to that same space all the time, and the other guys are all over the place. So what happens is you reach this kind of place where it starts thrashing and nothing gets done. And that's what so that's what happened. That was the architecture. And the idea that NetApp had, and it would built a company on this, was to say, they call it waffle, write anywhere file layout. They said, when we're writing the file, instead of writing it in the same sequential segments, we'll just write it wherever the heads happen to be and we can find an open spot, and at night we'll clean it up. And the performance curve went like, it would go like this and then like this, and with NetApp it went like this, right? So they changed the industry, a simple idea, and it was dependent on the geometry of the disk. Now, Flash comes along. There's no moving heads. You can write anywhere you want, anytime you want, at no penalty. The whole idea of what NetApp did has been obsoleted by the essence of the technology. Not that anything changed; they would just kind of create these disks out of Flash, and then they treat it the same way. John's insight was that it was a different geometry. So let me talk about what he did. He said, when you have high performance applications, what happens is that the disks are depopulated. That is, you can't really fill them up because you can't get the data off there. So what you really want to do is take the same amount of data and put a whole bunch of disks so you get increased bandwidth to this data. So the disks are essentially depopulated. So the first thing we can do with Flash is we can get rid of that problem. The second thing we can do with Flash is we can dedupe it. We can dedupe the data. Anytime we write data, we only write it once, and then we just write a pointer, which is very efficient for space. And the third thing we can do is we can compress everything, because computing cycles are cheap. We can put a computer inside the system, is invisible to everybody, does all the compression and decompression. And they got about a compression ratio, an overall compression ratio of about 50 to 1 as compared to disks.
Wow.
And as a result of that, they were able to come to market, pure storage, 10 times the performance, 1/10 the power and space, same price as disk.
Pow.
Wow. And the insight was new geometry.
Mm-hmm.
So I look at that and say, when he told me this idea, I could see the disruptive nature. That Flash was disruptive, but we haven't seen the disruption yet. We haven't seen nobody's cashed out on the opportunity yet. So I helped him, get that company started and build it, and it's now a big public company, and that's one of the great stories of the day.
Truly. Congratulations on that.
So for me, the fascinating part was, hey, let's not think about Flash as another disk. Let's think about it as its own thing. One of the companies that is a favorite experience of mine was Skybox. So I was teaching my Formation of New Ventures class. I had 3 students in the class, 2 of whom were from the engineering school, PhD candidates in aeronautical engineering, and one of them who was in the MBA program. And they were together working on a program. Now, when you teach, it's a sea of faces. They're all brilliant, but you don't know anybody's backstories. You don't really know what's going on in their lives outside of what you experience in their classroom persona. So one day I'm doing a business, people are presenting business plan presentations, and I'm a judge, and these 3 guys get up and they make this presentation that they want to go build the next generation of imaging satellite. And they want to go have a fully loaded launch cost for this satellite of $5 million. So fully loaded launch cost is the physical satellite, the renting some space on a rocket ship to put it into orbit, the insurance, transportation, all that stuff. Not any of the R&D, but $5 million fully loaded launch cost. And the next cheapest one flying is $500 million. It's like, wow. So they were making this presentation, and at the end of the presentation, I said to them, so you guys actually want to start a company, or are you just kind of talking here, or what do you want to do? And they said, no, we'd love to start a company. And I said, well, I can help you do that. And I I introduced them to Khosla Ventures, who's probably the most adventurous venture firm in the industry, willing to do crazy things. Not crazy, but, exciting things. The partner of record is Pierre Lamont. I might have met him at that. No, I met him at a different company before that. They put in $3 million. We started this company, and over the next few years, we raised a total of $90 million. And in, let me get my dates right here, in November of 2013, we launched our first satellite. And the satellite's fully loaded launch cost was $15 million. Not bad. Because when you say 5 million versus 500 million, it's like, well, if we're wrong by 2 or 3, who cares, right? It still has the same. It changes profoundly changes the economics of the industry. And being a creature of Silicon Valley, I say, even if this doesn't, we have to go take market share from other people by being, quote, cheaper and faster. But more importantly, the economics open marketplaces that didn't exist before. And they will find us. That's what, it's such a disruptive technology. So, the first launch was on I love this story. The first launch was on a Russian Dnepr rocket ship. A Dnepr is used in Russia for commercial launches. They sell it in this market. It's very hard to get a launch. You want to rent space on someone else's rocket, and you got to find someone going to the right place at the right time. It's a very kind of thin, very esoteric market that you try to shop in, right? So we finally end up on this NEPR, and the thing gets moved out and it gets delayed, which was good because we had more work to do. And we finally launched this thing. And I say that when we figure out we're going to launch on a NEPR, I say to the CEO, it's like, so we're all going to go to Russia, and we're going to eat caviar, we're going to drink vodka, and we're going to have a launch party, like the real thing.
Yeah.
He said, no, it doesn't work like that. And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, the NEPR actually is a repurposed ICBM that used to have multiple warheads aimed at the United States. It's on a secret Russian base in a silo. I said, oh, okay. Okay. So about 2 weeks before launch, the actual launch, this was 6 months earlier, we're sitting in a meeting and a new investor says, so are we worried about the weather? Because you always hear about, in Cape Canaveral, Cape Kennedy, whatever. Oh, it's raining, it's too cold, it's too hot, it's cloudy, whatever. They always have this weather report, And so the CEO says, nah, it's an ICBM. They go rain or shine. So that's a little anecdote on the company. It was kind of a fun thing. But we launched a satellite, and it worked perfectly. We knew at that point in time that this was serial number one, that we could do this for $10 million, because it gets better as you go along. You buy your own rocket and launch 10 of them at a time. That's more economic. And we really changed the world. When we were building this company, everybody in the space business was watching this company, looking at it like a bunch of high school kids in a science project. They're really cute, but it's not exactly. This is not real. And then they launched this thing and it worked, and it was like a miracle. I mean, we changed. Today, there's a whole collection of space startups. And Skybox was the first one. Skybox opened the window for opportunity for space entrepreneurship. We were getting ready to launch our second one in July of 2014, and Google came along and bought the company for $500 million. And my three students made about, $20, $25 million a piece in that transaction. When it was all over, they wrote me a note that said, if it wasn't for you, we'd still be in the basement of the engineering school arguing with each other. So that was probably, from a psychic reward point of view, probably the most psychically rewarding company I ever was involved with. Those are students that were inspired rather than impacted. They changed the world. They walk away from that believing they could do things that they never believed before. And I help them do that. And it's very rewarding for me personally.
This reminds me that for the record, I did want to make sure that we asked you about your key concepts about strategic transformations and your arc of a company. Could we, paper and ideas?
Sure.
Could we add in
your
thoughts on that?
Read the paper. Mark Leslie LinkedIn. Mark Leslie first round review.
for this video.
Right. So given my personal experience, I have come to believe that companies that are great are built out of so first I believe whatever product, whatever company we have has a kind of its own lifetime. It could be a year or two, and it could be 100 years, but it has its own lifetime. And that the world continues to change around us, and eventually that product and that idea will be imperiled by new things, right? And that what a company has to do with this, and I kind of described that first thing as an arc, what a company has to do to be a great company is to build a new business on top of that, something that is different and transformative and creates a new opportunity and can continue to build arcs. That the fundamental problem associated with that is a problem of leadership. we have, and certainly in big corporations, CEOs that come in for a tenure of 5 to 10 years. They just want to run the business and make every quarter and be successful. Making every quarter, in a sense, is the opposite of transformation. Transformation has risk, and it's not about execution; it's about strategy. Whereas making every quarter is essentially about execution. And so, we kind of look at some, lessons. You look at a Kodak as an example, a once great company, a company with a brand that there was no place that you could go in this world where you didn't see a kiosk with a little bunch of yellow boxes with Kodak film in it. Kodak had insight to the fact that digital photography was coming. They had more patents than anybody else. They had the first products and everything than anybody else. And they failed to transform the company, and they went out of business, and then they couldn't sell their patent portfolio. It's a story, it's a story of tragedy, right? And the question is given that they knew, why didn't they do anything about it? And so that's kind of what this paper is about. I define that there's two kinds of leaders in companies. There's kind of leaders that are operationally driven, do things well, make the next quarter, do incremental improvements. There's people who are opportunity driven, that want to go build a signature company. They want to go change the world. They're willing to take more risk. And you need that kind of person in order to be able to build a great company. Now, sometimes companies go back and forth between them, but eventually you need that kind of person. I wrote the paper before just before the more current news, but I have a perfect way to illustrate it. Microsoft went from Steve Ballmer to Satya Nadella. Steve Ballmer ran the company as an operationally driven, made the quarters, stock didn't move, the company became less and less relevant, and everybody had essentially written it off as a company that would be around for a long time, and would make cash, but eventually would die. They were always protecting their existing product base and things like that. Satya Nadella came in and said, all's fair, let's change everything. Went after the cloud. The idea today, you can download all of the Microsoft Office products onto your phone for free. That never would have happened in a million years under Steve Ballmer. Office is one of our premier products, and anybody who wants is going to pay for it. So this mindset that the world changed with mobile, and you're not going to charge $400 for, a word processor and a spreadsheet, didn't exist before Satya Nadella. So he's the perfect example of the contrast of two leaders. And the other perfect example is Apple. Apple went from, Steve Jobs, the opportunity-driven visionary leader, Tim Cook, bless his heart, he is certainly a nice man. What have we seen since 2011? We've seen a better camera on the iPhone. 6 years. There's nothing going on there. The place is just vacant of ideas and courage, essentially. But it's an amazing company, and they're going to milk the cash, and there's so much momentum behind it that before it goes over the top of the curve, it's going to have years of going up the curve, right? So it's all going to look good, even when it's decaying on the inside. So those are the two people that I think illustrate perfectly. I call Tim Cook the new Steve Ballmer. So. The final note in that paper, or the final idea in that paper that I think is interesting, is the window of optionality. People always wait too long. If you look at the arc of life of a company, the window of optionality is after the risk is out of the existing product, when you're on the steepest part of the growth curve, when things are going great, you're making money hand over foot, execution doesn't matter because everything is great. That's the time to take risks to do the next thing, because as soon as you pass that point, it gets harder and harder. Eventually, you go to the far side of the curve where you're closing factories, laying off people, crying, to your investors, and there is no money to do no money or opportunity to do anything at that point. The active investors are all over your behind and everything. So that's a point in time when you've missed the opportunity to do anything. So there is a window of optionality on this arc. So that's the kind of the essence of that paper.
Thank you. I'd like to pull back the sort of periscope and take a 10,000-foot view. Came here thinking you might give it a try to Silicon Valley, and you've not only been phenomenally successful, but you've been at the heart of it, and it's transformed itself again and again. How do you look at Silicon Valley's change and transformation, and is it at risk? What do you see kind of right now?
I should preface this by saying I'm a genetic optimist and genetically happy. So I never see the glass half full. I never see it half empty. I only see it half full. I think that Silicon Valley is about 50 years old. It is the miracle of our time. I think of it as the Florence of the 21st century. It's the place where the smartest people and the most ambitious people find their way here from all over the world, truly all over the world. You go around to these companies and, it's hard to find someone born in Kansas, is what I can tell you. And we change the world, not always good, but we change everything about the world. We have, more homeless and more higher rents and more traffic than we used to have, which is probably exactly what they had in Florence. Yes,
Yes.
They probably had exactly the same problems of high rent and too much traffic in the streets and too many homeless people and things like that. We are building the cathedrals of our time, the Apple headquarters and the Facebook headquarters. These are all these architectural wonders, People are going to come for many years in the future and come and visit those and look at them and wonder. As the cathedrals of the Renaissance. And I think there's at least another 50 years in front of us. I think we don't even have to, so the underlying, the thing that underlines all of the innovation in Silicon Valley is the speed of processors, the density of storage, and the bandwidth of communications. Those are the three things that drive all of the innovation above it. And I see those things to continue on indefinitely into the future, and we don't know what it's going to bring. I mean, who knew about the internet? Who knew about the iPhone? I remember being, I'm a very observant person in the industry. I spend a lot of time thinking. I remember being surprised at the internet. Like, where did that come from? And then before I finished the sentence, it was all over the place. Same thing with the iPhone. I mean, the iPhone, 10 years old, and most people can't imagine that they didn't have it before 10 years from now. That is so much part of this. You never leave your house without your iPhone or Android or whatever. And if you do, you go back and get it, even if you're late for your next appointment.
Absolutely.
That's how identified we are as an extension of self. So these innovations, these changes, why should they stop? I mean, it's amazing the things we're going to do. AI, robotics, the horizons in front of us are as exciting today as they ever were.
I know David had a few other questions
I
too
think
that are along
that's,
these lines, looking ahead.
No, I think
you?
we've really covered them. I think that's excellent. Yeah.
I do have one. I hope this isn't extraneous to what you've already shared, Mark, but as a great teacher, you have lessons that you share. I noticed you talked about inspiring all and
impact all, inspire a
few. I think there's something called the Leslie Law that are there, as you think about inspiring the next generation of innovators and entrepreneurs, is there some advice, pithy advice?
Definitely.
Now's the time, please share.
So when I teach, I have what's known in the school as a last lecture. And the last lecture is your parting, you do some course summary, but mostly it's your parting ideas that you want to leave with the students. And I go through this, kind of things I learned in my career. I go through this, talk about leadership and how to build companies and what does a CEO do. But the last two slides, I think, are the pithiest. You talk about being a CEO, and the next to the last slide, it says, if you want a friend, buy a dog. I have a picture of my dog. And it speaks to the slide right before that, by the way, says, if there's anything you want to do in life, if you want to do something special in life, it takes commitment, intensity, focus, and endurance. And when you do that, you give up something else. And there's no 110%, there's no quality time, those things are delusions. And if you want to be great, you got to make that commitment. Nobody becomes an Olympic gold medalist who didn't spend 10 years of their life doing nothing but becoming an Olympic gold medalist. It's just, you can't do it. And then if you want to go build a great company and you want to be a CEO, you're going to be, it is a lonely job. They say, it's lonely at the top because it is very lonely at the top. There's things you have to do. It's lonely that you have to think about things with nobody else to think about it with, some of the things you do. And it is lonely. You can experience loneliness, but you have to be comfortable in your own skin and comfortable without the social reinforcement that most people need in order to do the job. So second to last slide, if you want a friend, buy a dog. Gets a laugh, but it means something. And the last slide, and I think it's the most important, and it's the advice I give to people that I personally value the most. Regrets in life will be tempered with time. But regrets for the things you've never done is inconsolable. That's, for me, words to live by. And I translate that to say, look, you guys are headed out into the rest of your life. You should do what you want to do and what has meaning to you. You will have a day of reckoning in the future. You're 60 years old, you're going to say, have I done what I wanted to do, or at least tried? It doesn't matter what your parents think. It doesn't matter what your peers think. It only matters that what you think and what you want to do, and you have to be thinking about that day of reckoning someday in the future. Have I done with my life what I want to do? Have I decided what's important, and have I placed my energy onto what's important? And I believe that to be the most important thing in life. That regret for what you've done is tempered with time. Regret for what you've not done is inconsolable. I believe that. Those are my words. They're not it's a quote from someone else, but those are words to live by for me.